just a pause. And this is what we're doing today. I think this is so fitting. Yeah, I got caught reading Water Dancer, and
Yes, of course.
I couldn't stop. And then I was like, oh shoot, it's 11:55.
Our brother put a lot of work into that. People think now, especially now with writing, that and you know this better than probably all of us as a journalist who understands more important that the edit and the rewrite is in many ways more important than the write. People think they can just put blog posts out there and just start tweeting and posting and it's done. No, that's the beginning of the writing process. So as much effort as Ta-Nehisi put in that, I'm sure that's why he got caught up. He thought about every one of them words a million times.
Mendacity is the word. I was ruminating on mendacity. He used that word so powerfully. And I'm just sitting there and he keeps talking about the fuse that sets off love, that sets off the desire to be free. And once it's lit, you can't, I don't know whether you can snuff out dynamite once you start, the fuse getting lit, at some point. So
it's interesting that you say that in the context of where we are today, of course, but also in the context of the Water Dancer. When we went to Kemet, to Egypt last year, 19, the Water Dancer had, was it 2 years ago? No, it was last year. It hadn't been released. Well, I found an advance copy at the Strand on the way, because typically what I'll do is when I leave DC, when we go to Kemet, I take only a handful of books and a handful of clothes and 2 empty suitcases so that I can get all the books that I missed in the years since we've been to Aswan and Cairo and Luxor, and go to the bookstores, my Knubians out there in the market, and get the books. So I don't take a lot of books overseas. But I stop usually before I go to JFK and pick up whatever I save space for a couple of books that are new that I'm going to take with me. And I was at the Strand and I found an advance copy of The Water Dancer. And interestingly enough, I see the Strand is crying broke. And I'm like, wow, if the Strand is crying broke, support these Black bookstores. And of course, we know people are doing it here. But anyway, so I found a copy. So great, this is great. I won't ship this back to DC. I'll put this in my suitcase. And so I started reading it, going over. And so I'm sitting by the Nile at night reading, or early in the morning at sunrise before the students come. We got to get rolling. And, thinking about that novel and thinking about the research that went into it and the trajectory of that brother, Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I guess we'll be talking about him again as we take our pause, talk about comic books today, among other things. In fact, I got a few of his Black Panthers stacked up around here. But, thinking about it in this context of where we are right now with this election coming up Tuesday, ending Tuesday, or ending whenever. But, what freedom looks like has a lot to do with our immediate circumstances. And freedom isn't only a destination. Freedom is a struggle. Freedom is a process. In fact, there's a book, I think Francisco Paletti, I think is the author of it. I'd have to go look for it. It's called Freedom is a Constant Meeting, where, the author is looking at how they built community and local power in the process of the civil rights movement in Mississippi, or what we call the Black Freedom Movement in the 1960s in Mississippi. She's focusing on in particular. He's focusing on in particular an Italian scholar. And, we think about this, when we think about voting, I think too often voting is seen as an end in itself or a destination. It is only one weapon in a constant struggle. So when Ta-Nehisi is writing in the Water Dancer about these Africans trying to figure their way to freedom, even if that freedom simply means to be able to possess one's own mind in the middle of an absurd circumstance, and how other people will seize on that for their own uses, sometimes good, sometimes bad. The thing that we must always remember is that our struggle, our collective struggle, part of the liberating effect of that struggle is to participate in that effort in the moment. That's why we see these Black people dancing in lines in Philly and dancing in Detroit. And people are saying, oh, look at these Negroes, they being tricked into dancing. You really going to try to steal the joy of African people who have determined that this is a weapon in this particular moment that we will use to protect our interests? Because they're not dupes. They are simply saying, this is in my interest right now. In fact, it's even in yours. If you could, scrub that little 5 words you read out of a sentence, out of a paragraph, out of a book that you copied from somebody the other day. No, stay here with us. This is the moment. And in this moment, this is our moment of saying, in this moment, we choose to do what's in our interest. And Ta-Nehisi, every page of that book, you feel that jumping out of the page. I'm not going to die.
And let's pause there, because being with you takes me back to being 3 years old in nursery school. We had a dance contest, and I remember I had a dance partner, and I stayed up all night practicing the funky chicken. I had the routine, Dr. Carr, in my head, what we were going to do to win. I was 3. I remember it like it was yesterday.
My God.
They call us, me and this little boy, and we get out there, and he does his own thing. But his dance was so amazing that I could just keep up with him, and we ended up winning. Not doing my funky chicken, not doing my plan. Dancing with you is that. I come in every week with this kind of thought, today I was going to talk about the pause, because I don't want to talk about the election. I'm tired. I don't want to talk about Trump. I'm tired. I don't want to talk about Biden. I don't want to talk about Kamala. I want to talk about you. I want to take a pause and just kind of go off into a space that I know you love.
Yeah.
And kind of as a blueprint for all of us, because, we get so erudite and heady in this pursuit of knowledge and power that we forget the child in us. And so people are raising children, and the joy that you just talked about when you see us, and I don't care if you're 99 with a cane, when some line music comes on, you dropping that cane, you getting in line, and you
how about that?
And and it's just who we are. We're not minstrels. They may mock us, but that's the thing that keeps us free, even in the midst of bondage. And that's what the message is. Your freedom is up to you, no matter what your condition is. Every day you have to pursue it. And that's why, I got kind of hemmed up, because I was just ruminating on that. But when I come into this space with you, it's like that dance contest that I'm going to win, but maybe not doing the funky chicken.
We know the charts. Yeah, I ain't gonna go off. Look, one thing's for sure, I dance not gonna do my own thing. The only way we do it is together. That's the only way we do it. So that morning when he showed up and did that thing, he said, well, I could keep up. Well, how could you keep up? I could keep up because I know how to dance. In fact, Robert Farris Thompson calls it, he says that's one of those things he saw wherever he went in the African world, on the continent, throughout the United States and Latin America, the Caribbean. He says it's called, he calls it, 2 things. 1, correct entry and exit. He says, whenever you see these African people, even when they look like they're doing their own thing, that thing is so synced with everyone else that even the solo is part of the collective. Why? Because the people who are around it can watch it, listen, can observe, and sync their movement. That's what people love about our improvisations: jazz, hip hop, double Dutch, you name it. You can do your own thing, but it can't be so far out there that the rest of us can't seize on it, see where it's going, and kind of move in and get our rhythm. And the other thing is, he says, he calls it, he borrows a German word, effervism. He said, this is the stronger power that comes from youth. So that the elders, we see it out there. In fact, I have a very good friend whose parents are in Raleigh. And she called him and said, wait, Pop, y'all going to stand in line? Yeah, we're going to stand in line. I said, but the line may be long, so don't worry about that. And so when we see elders, we understand that when that music comes on, you don't have to get off your cane. You have to get off your wheelchair. What Robert Farris Thompson says is, when you see an elder dance, sometimes they don't move nothing but their finger. So as the electric slide going, they're doing like this. And everybody like, whoa. In other words, we show, and when I went, early voting started in Maryland Monday. I'm right across the DC state line, right up Georgia Avenue. So I encounter an election judge, young sister. I said, how old are you? She said, 20 years old. I said, I see you, young Latina sister. And I checked in, whatever. And now I'm moving through the line with my mask on. I'm going to use electronic, but I got the ballot thing going, right? Some people going to vote by hand. And then when I got to the front, there was a line of chairs. And this line of chairs were people who couldn't stand in the line, who had gotten their ballot. And then the election judges were like, every time a person would come who had to sit in the chair, the electing judge would tell somebody in the line, you see that lady right there? Okay, when you get in front, you let her stand up and get in front of you. And I'm in this huge auditorium, a converted rec center library up Georgia Avenue. And what I'm watching is probably maybe at the peak when I was there, a couple hundred people between the judges, the people who are voting, everybody's there. And majority non-white, Asian, Latinx, Latino, Afro-Latino, Guatemalan, Honduran, because I'm listening to people talking like African people, some of them clearly immigrants from other parts of the African world, Africa, the Caribbean, myself, son of someone who came through enslaved, which I got my Paul Robeson on repping today. Again, we're going to tie all this in. And I'm saying, see, this is the society that the white nationalists are terrified of. And it's not coming anymore. It's here. You understand? And so because it's here, and when you see a society like this, ain't nobody shouting, ain't nobody screaming. I'm sure some people in that line gonna vote for Trump, but today is not the day you're gonna show out. Because see, all these human beings, these are human beings. And you might be a human being too if you set aside your hate. But in this moment right here, these elders who can't walk, they good. They're placed in a line secured by the rest of us. So there's correct entry and exit. There's epiphysium. And all of it moves toward a society that we haven't quite achieved yet, except in that moment that we were all in that room. That's what the society we want to live in looks like. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's gonna be a beautiful thing, you know, or not. We might just have to knuck if we buck. But guess what? You're not gonna win.
And speaking of that, I spent last weekend because I'm studying genres, and I'm studying television and movies because I want to get back into writing. And I watched this television series called Queen's Gambit. The Queen's Gambit. It's on Netflix. Do you play chess? I started
the first episode. It looks fascinating. How is it?
It's amazing. So I'm not going to give away anything, but she is a prodigy. She's a genius, a chess genius, little girl. I won't give you all of the details about her life, but at some point she has to play the Russians. And the question is like, why can't we beat the Russians? And the answer is because the Russians, they work together, like that dance we were talking about, where I may not know all your steps, but I'm here and we're going to work together to win. So the grandmaster is only the grandmaster because there's so many other grandmasters helping that one person. They'll pause. This is where the pause comes in. And shout out to Jaquette Timmons, who does a podcast on my Hub network. And this week, her podcast was about the importance of taking a pause, even in conversation, just taking a breath. They will pause in the midst of a match. If it's getting tight, set the clock, put their movements, and then go convene and talk about what the next move should be. She was operating as a solo person because she was a genius. And somebody said to her, in order to win, you need a team. You need what they have. And I just thought about it in reference to this family that we've created here in this space, during this time. And what you just said is codified everything that I already know, that we need all hands on deck.
Yes, and working together. And what you said, working together and working in concert and conferring. You know, man, Karen, again, thank you. And everybody who's joining every week, I'm glad folks are subscribing. I see the numbers going up, and you know, it's a very important moment what we have here. It's like some energy. Does like sound like look like the electricity tried to go off, but I'm on the phone, so it should be okay. The crowdsourcing we're doing. I'm going to use a word that isn't quite fit, but we know that word now. This isn't an enhancement. It's increasingly going to be the way that we do education. You know, I was with a lot of my colleagues. Hampton, Howard, and Morgan State have a collective on developing new teachers, new professors coming into professorate. And we had a meeting, Dr. Kamala, Dr. Williams, Dana Williams, the folks at the graduate school at Howard, and they asked me to come talk about how to motivate students. And so, you know, I talked for, 20, 30 minutes, and then we had conversation. It was an hour, so we really talked about it. And, I'm asking about education in the future. And we're having these conversations, and a couple of our brothers and sisters from Hampton really chimed in on the kind of, the fears some of our young people are expressing. And we had a long conversation about that, the anxieties about paying all this money and tuition, and we talked about how we're exploding our classrooms. And I talked a little bit about what we're doing. And I said, it's important for us to understand that one of the roles of teachers is to inspire folks to teach themselves. And when we're in the example you gave, with Queen's Gambit, the West often has this notion of the lone gun, but there's rarely a lone gun. There's always institutions at play. And how do individuals don't defeat institutions, and collectives are not defeated by individuals, no matter how brilliant they are. And so in that conversation yesterday, I'm thinking about today, and then coming into our space today, realizing we're going live again, it is the collective that is really growing this space, so that whenever this passes, and we may never not go with masks when we go outside again in our lifetimes, but that's not really the issue. What this moment has shown us is that we can be together and we can learn and move collectively. And these are the first, as you always say, these are the first baby steps. I was listening this morning to WPFW, one of the Pacific networks here, my man Lance Reynolds, who's a DJ who talks every Saturday morning with one of the great legends of the Black freedom struggle, Dory Ladner, one of our Jegnas, one of our great elders, and she's always on there. And they're in the middle of a fundraising drive, because Pacifica, of course, doesn't take commercial money. And so, they raise their money a little bit at a time. And so Lance is like on there, he's talking to Miss Dory, and he says, "Oh, Miss Dory, we're going to use your birthday for a fundraising thing. So everybody, y'all cash app us $14.52. Or better yet, y'all," because it's 1942, right? A birthday. And then she said, "Oh, better yet, put $5 on it. Y'all put the cash." He gives the cash app thing. And all this money starts coming in. And I'm thinking to myself, this is how Carter G. Woodson did it, but he didn't have the technology. This is how Karen Hunter is doing it with the technology. In other words, when you put $5 on it, or you participate in any way, what you're really doing is joining a collective, and we're building an institution. And so, this isn't a time when you're worried about tuition. This isn't a time when you're worried about how you're going to pay for the dorm. Are we opening back up? I mean, no, we're open every time we're together. And in between the time we're together, we're studying, we're talking, we're supporting other institutions, bookstores, Black bookstores. And so, if you're listening to this right now, if you're in line voting, I found out, again, we were on a reparations conversation Thursday night. The folks, Sister Jam Abunor, and some of the folks who are putting together this question on reparations, and the topic was reparations on the ballot. Ron Daniels, a bunch of other people were on the call. A couple of the lawyers for the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, Ajia Toro. And I was talking to Nkechi Taifa, who was on, who just did her book, Black Power, Black Lawyer, one of the most important Black lawyers, really, of the 21st century. And Nkechi is like, I go on my walks in the morning on Saturdays, and y'all are my soundtrack. You my podcast. And I said, really, Nkechi? She said, yeah. And I said, so if you're in line waiting to vote, listening to us, or if you've already voted and this is your pause, or if you are on the fence, which I guess there are some folks on the fence. In fact, one of your regular listeners, Karen, Dr. Burnett Gallman out of Columbia, South Carolina, his daughter and her friends have put together a website called votersonthefence.org. And so if you're on the fence and you should listen to us, take your pause, and then get out there Tuesday, because I think Saturday you can go in North Carolina. But if you haven't voted early and you're registered and able to vote, and you thinking about Tuesday, then this is a moment for us to remember that voting may be an individual act, but it's for a collective purpose when it comes to Black people. And so if you're on the fence, yeah, that's pretty good though. Actually, I'm glad that happened. That was probably probably all actually of Stephen Miller's ancestors, and that's just about as powerful as they are. Just enough to trip a chord. But because all of our ancestors on the other side, like, wait, now see, we look away for 5 minutes, and here come all these. Because if you've been following the news, of course, the rest of y'all, I know Karen knows, Stephen Miller has a bit of overconfidence, talking on the White Nationalist News Network, also known as Fox, previewed a couple of days ago what they plan to do in a second term, which is attack citizenship. He even said that, people who are applying to come here, we are going to start asking questions as to their ideological beliefs, because to determine whether or not they're susceptible to persuasion. See, what happened in Nazi Germany isn't coming. It's already, in fact, the Nazis came here. If you read the book of Hitler's American Model, they based what they were doing there on what we were doing, or what the United States was doing here. So Miller has already previewed it. If you're also paying attention, you probably saw that there have been some deportations take place in the last month. Folks sent to Haiti, folks sent to Africa who had applied for asylum, just being rejected. And so, this perhaps is a little bit of a show of overconfidence from the white nationalist party. For people who think elections don't matter, they're lining up. And so if you're listening to this on the fence, if you've already voted, if you're in line right now, know that you're part of this collective. And I'll end with this for now in terms of this conversation, because there's so many things we want to talk about in this question of pausing, right? And of course, in music, a pause is a place where there's a rest between notes, between sound. So it isn't over. It's just a moment of respite. It's a moment of rest. In fact, it often enhances what came before and what came after. So in this pause, the reason I put on my Paul Robeson today is he goes, I don't call myself a slave, and Robeson didn't either. So when he says here, my father was a slave, this is from the testimony that Paul Robeson gave before the House Un-American Activities Committee. And if you know anything about the House Activities Committee, the rest of y'all, Karen already knows this, obviously. But many of us, as you know, that was the committee that was staffed. The staff supported McCarthy, Senator McCarthy, who attacked people. Or you remember the Communist Party and Azina scared the hell out of people, had Jackie Robinson come and try to have him testify against Paul Robeson, trying to, they took Paul Robeson's passport, W.B. Du Bois's passport, Shirley Graham Du Bois's wife, S.E. Robeson. They're going to stop them from traveling. And one of the staffers, of course, in fact, one of the key staffers for McCarthy was a dude named Roy Cohn. And so you all know Roy Cohn was Donald Trump's mentor. He's also on the other side, probably ganged up with Stephen Miller's ancestors, and that's all he could do was stop this and turn his phone over for a second. Very weak ancestors. But at any rate, this question of whether or not you're an American or not, Paul Robeson was like, look, my father was a slave, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to have a piece of this country, and none of you fascist-minded people are going to drive me away. Am I clear? Now, does that mean Paul Robeson was a flag waver? No, it does not. Even Jack Robinson, who was brought in to say, I don't know if Robeson should be talking like that. Even Jack Robinson wrote in his autobiography, published after he passed, that he didn't salute the flag. Jack Robinson was a veteran who had been court-martialed when he was in the Army because he wouldn't put up with segregation. But Jack Robinson said, I don't salute the flag from birth in Georgia in 1919 and now. I never had it made. But it wasn't that Robeson was that, flag waver. What Robeson is saying, and in fact, in the title of the biography that his wife, Eslanda, one of the books she wrote, and she wrote several books, was Paul Robeson, Negro. And she talks about them, the Robesons, being citizens of the world. There's a mountain name for Paul Robeson in Russia. Paul Robeson traveled all over the world, learned all these languages to discuss, to sing people's songs in. But what Robeson was saying was, my people, and it's not one of those, we built this country and we fought the Indians. No. The blood sacrifice our ancestors made to simply survive means that whatever this fight is going to be was paid for before we ever came out of the room. And it isn't a fight for American democracy. It's a fight for survival and a fight to thrive as human in the world. And no fascists are going to stop us. When after next week, when the sun rises, we have to figure out, okay, what's next? Because voting ain't the yellow tape. We're not running through a finish line. That's just a strategy on the way to the next thing. So that's why I wore my Paul Robeson. And the other reason I wore it, I thought about it, because we're going to talk a little bit about pausing and think about things that bring people joy. And, there is one other thing, but I'll mention this in a minute because I'm Miss Robeson. This just came out. This is a graphic biography of Paul Robeson. Very interesting. The art and text is by Sharon Rudall, and it was edited by Paul Buell and Lawrence Ware. Paul Buell is one of the biographers. In fact, he did biographies of C.L.R. James, but he also did a lot of work on James. Did a graphic novel on James too. But we're going to talk a little about comic books later on, or intermittently. And you know, when we think about young people in particular, you know, who might not be encouraged in today's climate to sit and read a book with no pages, although we should always encourage, particularly young people watching this.
No pictures.
No pictures. Right. I'm sorry. Thank you. No pictures. Right. This is that right. No pictures. The graphic novel is a nice point of entry. And one of the reasons I like these types of graphic novels is because they come with a nice little bibliography and then an essay at the end. And, you know, it's pretty well done. It's pretty well done. You know, it's got Paul Robeson in there with, you know, singing Old Man River. Of course, people always know that one, right? Old Man River just keeps moving along. This isn't even the first one, but it's a nice little graphic biography of Robeson. But I thought I saw you, I guess it was this morning, tweeted something about Sean Connery. He made transition.
Yeah, 90.
What you think about Sean Connery? I saw what you said.
Yeah, he was the baddest Bond. You know, I hated all the rest of them.
Did you?
Yeah, Pierce Brosnan,
Roger Moore.
Yeah, nah, something about them. Sean Connery had swag. And then somebody came on my timeline and was like, well, he was a Brexit person and he was horrible. I was like, that's not what I know, and that may all be true. But you know, Sean Connery always seemed to be and oh, speaking of chess, he played in this film where he was teaching a young brother how to play chess. And you know, he just always seemed very affable to me. I like him and his style. And there was something about the Scottish brogue, and I don't know. I just
was that it wasn't Finding Forrester.
Yeah, I think it was Finding Forrester.
Where the kid went to the rich school and he was the graduate, but he was a recluse. He was living in the same apartment building.
Yes.
That's right. You know, it's interesting, Connery, because I think I probably felt about him and feel about him the same way you did and do. In turn, because we grew up in that era. You know, it was I never saw a James Bond movie in the theater with Sean Connery because we were too young, and so we had to wait for it to come on TV. You know, and it was many years later when you know, as an adult, then watch these other Sean Connery, other James Bonds. It was later to, you know, start digging around in the history of Ian Fleming and looking at the role of James Bond that I understood that the Bond movies really were an extension and metaphor of World War II, British and American imperialism, right? The tensions between the American agents and Bond. And then, you know, how and it seemed like every time they had a villain, it was either an Asian or an African, like the first Roger Moore film, Live and Let Die. That's probably of the Bond films, as far as I'm concerned. This is I always tell the students when we start thinking about these things. You know, that's probably the most racist of the Bond films. And it had some competition. Remember, Live and Let Die had Yaphet Kotto. He was the drug lord in Harlem. Yes. And also the voodoo guy. And Jane Seymour was the voodoo queen with the tarot cards. And I'm like, this is purebred racism. But as children, we rooting for Bond, right? I want to say it was it the first? No. Which was the one where he went in the hotel room and the sister with the afro was the agent from America. I don't know if it was From Russia with Love or Dr. No, but it might have been Dr. No. That was the first one. But anyway, I raise it because, you know, I did see that he had made transition. And of course, he was born in the slums of Edinburgh. He was working poor. Actually, he was poor. And he was a Scottish nationalist till he died. So in terms of Brexit, people say, oh, he's for Brexit. Do you understand that, yes, he was a subject of the British Crown, but he was part of the crew that wanted Scottish independence from Great Britain, because if you know the history of Scotland and Ireland and Wales, in other words, what they call Great Britain, you understand England is the colonizer. And, you know, they didn't need any black people to start practicing colonization. When you read in Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Something Torn and New, or any of the history of England, you know that Ireland was the colony that they tried. That's why people fall in love with, James Joyce, Ulysses, right? It's written in Erin, it's written in the Irish, because the Irish did not want to be colonized by the English any more than the Scots or anything. And so Sean Connery was a lifelong Scottish independent dude. In fact, he gave money every year to the Scottish independent cause. In fact, when they had him up for being, Sir Sean Connery, you know, his buddy, Sir Michael Caine, and all them guys, remember, after he left Bond, because he quit playing James Bond in part because he's tired of being typecast. He won't play Bond no more. That's why they had to go get Roger Moore for Live and Let Die, because Connery was like, I'm out. I don't want to play no more. But they made his friend Michael Caine, they knighted him, Sir Michael Caine, or whatever. They were in that movie, The Man Who Would Be King. But when Connery was up, there were British politicians that said no, because he's a Scot nationalist. In other words, so of course he's for Brexit. Why? His Brexit means, okay, we're gonna be independent. We need to be independent. But I still like to say that it's amazing how images influence us, and it creates tensions that are sometimes unresolvable. In other words, you have, on one hand, Black women who are objects of sexual desire and attraction, because the other thing about James Bond, they're hyper masculinist, right? So whether it be that sister in the early Bond movies, or whether you now come down and see the new Money Pennies and all these Black women who are coming in, and potentially now they throwing around, well, Idris Elba could be James Bond. Maybe we make James Bond a Black woman. And in the new one coming out, apparently there's a Black woman who has also got the 00 license to kill. And so all this is, because you got to sell movie tickets, and the world is increasingly non-white, so you got to get these people in. But that, so you have that on one side, and then you have on the other side the deep white nationalist message, imperialist message of the British and the Americans in the Bond novels, which lead to the Bond movies. And of course, here are a handful of the Bond novels. Dr. No, Ian Fleming. I mean, they got white women in there. I mean, oh my God. In fact, you open up Ian Fleming, the first page, Ian Fleming, and you have, with a fiendish smile, Dr. No taunted his prize captives, the brilliant agent James Bond and the beautiful blonde Honeychild. And Honeychild is spelled Chile. Just like some kind of minstrel thing, because the thing is, this is the one actually set in the Caribbean. There's the guy who, in fact, Ian Fleming, when he saw Sean Connery, he was like, this is not how I wrote him. But he was so moved by how Sean Connery played Bond that he eventually included him in some of his subsequent novels. And of course, From Russia with Love. Remember the little lady with the knife in her shoe? The Russians are the enemies, Goldfinger. Remember Odd Job? They trashed the Koreans. This is all racist stuff right here. Thunderball. You can go through all of Diamonds Are Forever. This is the one with Pussy Galore. If you remember, talk about patriarchy. The Spy Who Loved Me. Now you're gonna get into anyway. I won't go through all of them. We know the Bond movie. But the point is that,
why do you have them? Why do you have all those books?
Because I'm supposed to understand. Oh yeah, I should pause there and say this, right? Just a reminder. Remember the first time we sat and talked when Audra brought me up and we were all sitting there talking. When we built the curriculum in Philadelphia for the high school course, and again, everybody's in this crowdsourcing. We're in this now. We're building this. We're taking our first steps to build out a space where don't worry about how much the tuition costs. You're not going to bankrupt yourself. We're trying to inspire, as you always say, Karen, breadcrumbs. People can teach themselves. When we built that curriculum, we knew that we could not replace all the textbooks because the textbooks cost, that's big business. And I know one day we're going to spend maybe even multiple times talking about these textbooks. I've been stacking them as I come across another one, I put them aside. So I know we can have this conversation about textbooks. So, but we knew that we couldn't replace all the materials because too much money involved. But we knew that we could get these students to ask the right questions. Then together we would look for answers. We might not agree on the outcome, but we knew by asking the right questions, we would get better answers. So we talked about this, that first we had 6 questions we developed based on concepts. And the first 2 questions we ask are, who are Africans to other people and who are Africans to each other? So who are Africans to other people say, if we're involved in it, how are we being constructed by other people? So the reason I had these books is because for 2 reasons. Number one, if it's a book, I'm gonna at least pick it up. If it's a book I think got something to do with us, I'm gonna try to figure out a way to own it. So that's the reason I had these books. These books are littered with non-white people, and in that social structure category, who are these people to other people? Ian Fleming and then the James Bond movies in many ways rehearse and frame in terms of worldview who is us and who is them. And by us, I don't mean just us. I mean who the British and the Americans thought they were, and then they recruit us in to root against our own interests. The blacks are drug dealers and voodoo lords. The Asians are hat-throwing wackos. The Russians are all against, And who's going to save us? James Bond. But he's not one man. Where'd he get the license? He got the license from the British Intelligence Division, and he's in league with the CIA, and they don't agree all the time. Hell, they even let Jeffrey Wright play the CIA agent now that Daniel Craig is James Bond. What is that showing us? It's showing us that these institutions, we should be rooting for them against these other people who you've made non-human. That's the social structure category. The governance question is not in these books. It's not in the movies. Who are Africans to each other? And so the reason I had these books is because it's my job. I'm a teacher. I'm supposed to have the text. We're supposed to have conversations like this. We're supposed to end them quickly. And then people are supposed to say, oh, you know what? I'm inspired now to teach myself. Let me go out and look at these. Now, does that mean you don't go to see James Bond movies? No, you should, go do what you want. Do it for entertainment. Have a great time. I'll go see the next one because I'm going to see how they're going to play this sister in here, who I seen in the trailer is shooting from a distance, sniping. And I saw it's a young black woman. Just like they got a new black woman playing Batwoman. Just like Lovecraft is black as hell. Just like Watchmen, all the comics are sitting right over. I can see them, are black as hell. I'm going to go, of course. But with the more knowledge I have, I understand that this is not going to shape my worldview in a way where I'm going to vote against my interests, organize against my interests, whereas somebody who might not know that might come out of that popular culture and move in their real life in being shaped by the popular culture. Education should allow us to be able to distinguish between make-believe and the real world, and ultimately to create art that is better. So that's what I mean, of course, and in fact, this ain't even all of them. This is the paperbacks. I got these because, paperbacks are, they did this series, but then they have a corresponding group of hardbacks and the rest of them are there. But I'm fascinated by Ian Fleming because Ian Fleming was a British imperialist. And, Britain lost its empire, including what became the United States of America. And the tensions there are always interesting to me because while these things happen between European nation states, what doesn't happen is, or very rarely happens, is that any of those nation states break ranks with any of their brethren and join with some of the non-white world. That you're not going to see. In fact, we should probably, I hope I have it around here somewhere. I'm looking for, I was looking for Ron Walters because, I was reading Ron Walters earlier today. And I don't know what I did with it. That's unfortunate because
so that pile is getting bigger and bigger. People are concerned for your safety. I just want to.
Oh no! That's an optical illusion. See what happens is, y'all see these books over here. These books come from when I'm looking for other books, and then I'll stack these books up here. But what you can't see is all the rows behind, and then over that way with all those books. So. No. Don't even worry about that. No, ain't nothing collapsing, ain't nothing moving. However, while you asked, the ancestors moved this. This is the book I was looking at the other day. This is an important book, and then I know we're going to talk about comics. We got time to talk about that. We need to. This is a book, White Nationalism, Black Interest. This is another of Ron Walters' books, the great political scientist out of Wichita, Kansas. Pan-Africanist, very important. He dedicates the book to the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. In fact, there's a new Jesse Jackson book. Do I have that over here? Oh, I don't know what I did with it. Maybe, here it is. See? Nothing collapsed. Ain't nothing going to collapse. The stuff is over here. You just got to go quickly and go fairly efficiently. Yeah. This is David Masakrota's book, I Am Somebody, Why Jesse Jackson Matters, which tickled me to no end. I got to get up for this, Karen, because when I was starting to read it the other day, I know y'all can't see me right now because I had to stand up and reach across to another part of the reading desk I have here. It's a couple of other books. I started pulling together my Jesse pile after I started reading this book, Adolph Reed's Jesse Jackson Phenomenon, which is the first book to talk about the '84 campaign, which was very important. In fact, to tie to something we talked about last week, Adolph Reed Jr. is from Little Rock, Arkansas. His father, Adolph Reed Sr., one of the most brilliant political scientists of the 20th century, taught at black schools, Southern University, Arkansas, Pine Bluff. Very important brother. Adolph Reed Sr. graduated from that Dunbar High School we were talking about last week. But at any rate, this is the book Do you know this sister, Karen, Barbara Reynolds?
I don't know her personally, but
But you do know, yeah, she's a member of the craft with you, right?
Yes.
But I knew her because I guess when I was in college, I guess she was writing for USA Today. That's why I first encountered her. This is the first.
How many pages is that book?
Oh,
damn.
She did. This book is 489 pages with the index. This is the first major biography of Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson, the man, the movement of myth, Barbara A. Reynolds. In fact, there are passages in this book that Jesse and them did not like. And so they went after Barbara Reynolds and they published another edition called Jesse Jackson, America's David. So those who had that book, this is the book that came before it. Jesse didn't like. But the reason I bring any of them up, and there are a number of other Jesse books, these are just a couple that I had in arm's length. The reason I bring them up is because, you know, Ron Walters worked in those Jackson campaigns and he always organized for Black political power. And when you're reading, I was reading something, I guess it was Perry Bacon or Jamel Bowie were writing in the New York Times. In fact, I think it may have been Jamel Bowie. No, it was Perry Bacon. Perry Bacon was talking about these 7 different categories of Black political leadership. He said, this is not based on data surveys, based on my reporting, listening to people, talking to many of these people, talking to other people. He says it's like 7 categories, and I won't be able to remember them all now. I don't know if you saw it, you chime in, but he says he separates one of the categories out for the hard right. So the Ben Carsons, the Tim Scotts, and all the rest of them, the Danny Camerons, shout out to that profiling courage in Kentucky. And so they have all these, you know, have them. And then he talks about the Black political leaders who are over 60 years old, and includes Jackson and them. But he says the ones who are the old progressives, and he calls them a cautionary tale. He says because they should be a cautionary tale to another category, the young progressives, and he puts Ayanna Pressley, of course, Ilhan Omar, you know. And you know, it's interesting because there's a sister running in Texas to get to the national legislature, to the federal legislature, Congress, House of Representatives, who is Afro-Latina. And they're saying, well, if she's elected, she'll be the first Afro-Latina. And I'm like, see, y'all define Afro-Latina differently. Even when people don't self-select as Afro-Latina, if you're Puerto Rican, you Afro-Latina. So I'm looking at AOC like, okay, she might say I'm from the Bronx, but you know, you should press a little bit on that because the blood of Africa runs through everybody on the island of Puerto Rico just about. But anyway, that having been said, says those young progressives, Brother Bowman up there where you are, and you talk to him, of course, he said that the old progressives should be a lesson to the young progressives that if they don't seize power, they will be ignored. So that AOC and Ayanna Pressley and Ilhan Omar in a Biden-Harris administration could be ignored the way that Jesse and them were ignored by Obama and Clinton. And I'm thinking, actually, that's okay. Well, I'm not even going to unpack this. I understand you reading to people, you're writing to people with a 6th grade reading level, and maybe you actually believe that yourself. But it's a fairly unnuanced read. But then he has another category. He says, here are the kind of moderate to liberals who are over 60. And he puts into that category people like Jim Clyburn in them. And it's interesting to read. Also in the over 60 super progressives, he has Cornel West and all the rest of them, right? And so then he says, with the category of over 60 kind of liberal centrists, he's got John Lewis, had John Lewis, of course, James Clyburn in them, Sheila Jackson Lee, most of the Congressional Black Caucus. He's saying these people are the descendants of that first and second wave of Black elected officials post Voting Rights Act 1965, who are now inside the Democratic Party saying, in order for us to leverage this power to advance our collective objectives, we've got to remain viable. But he's distinguishing them from another group that includes Hakeem Jeffries, not Hassan, of course, Hassan's Ohio State, his brother, Hakeem Jeffries. And so he's saying these people who have often come out against some of the Black progressives and sided with the Democratic Party over other insurgents in the Democratic Party, like Charles Booker in Kentucky and them, they are really trying to position themselves to advance leadership. Now, I went through all that to say this. If there's somebody on the fence, voters on the fence, if there are Black people who are saying the parties are the same, now let's just pause here for 10 seconds and say this. If you're saying the parties are the same, well, 2 things. Probably you're not watching this. And number 2, you just can't let it go. because that's just flat foot wrong. But anyway, now let's resume the content-based part of our conversation. So what we're saying is that if you're still on the fence, understand that if the Democratic Party wins the presidency next week or the end of the month, whenever they, because that's another thing I want to mention is the Supreme Court. Because the White Nationalist Party now, let me just drop this footnote very quick. The White Nationalist Party now has pulled out all the stops. All the pretenses have been dropped. We went through the court's decisions, or the court's, not even opinions. They're not opinions. They're shadow opinions. Yeah, shadow opinions. Supreme Court means we're going to vote and take a vote, and then we're just going to say what it is in terms of either denying an injunction or upholding an injunction from or a stay from a lower court, a lower federal court. We're going to just say what our ruling is, but we won't write why. Now, if any of the justices want to write why, or why they dissent from the vote, they can do that. So over the last week, we've seen it happen in North Carolina. We've seen it happen in Wisconsin. We've seen it happen in Pennsylvania. And so we went through those decisions Wednesday night with my class at the law school. And it's one of the reasons I really value the time I get to spend teaching at Howard Law School, because I get some of the most brilliant students in the world. And these are Black students almost always. Sometimes I have a couple of students who are not Black, and that also enhances it as well. People think HBCUs are all Black. No, they're the most diverse universities actually in the country, and some of the most diverse in the world, because the Africans come from everywhere and the non-Africans come from everywhere. So I mean, it's really quite something to see Africans from the continent talking about SARS and police violence in Nigeria, discussing the parallels and the differences with and between police violence in the United States. And then you get somebody else say, well, I'm Nigerian too, but I'm second generation here, and I was born in Texas, and so I see it a little different from you. And then to have somebody jump in and say, well, I'm from Jamaica, let me tell you about how we're dealing with police violence. And then a Haitian comes in and says, we've been in the street for 6 months. And then the whole thing, and then we're feeling all of that into reading this white nationalism. And the one thing we all agree on is that these white nationalists are against us, all of us. So we go through the rulings, or go through the writings, the opinions, the defenses, and you see Samuel Alito saying that the Supreme Court should intervene in state constitutional matters when a state Supreme Court has ruled on the state constitution, because the federal constitution, when it says legislative, in other words, elections should be a matter of the state legislature. That means only the elected legislature and not the courts. Their move is to read the state Supreme Courts out of being able to interpret their own state constitutions. So all you conservatives who talk about, well, conservatives are for small government. Okay, stop repeating what you heard in high school and look at the world as it is. It's white nationalism. Ron Walterson wrote a book on it. Stop listening to people on YouTube and not then going and studying for yourself. See, that's the distinction between our time together and everybody else. We're going to tell you to go looking for yourself. You understand? So what they're doing is, and I know you saw it, Karen, right? Pennsylvania, the courts rule, okay, if the thing is postmarked, if your ballot is postmarked, you mailed in, it's postmarked before the 3rd of November. And shout out to all you people in Florida trying to stop people, the mail people, from being able to send the vote, get the votes out. We saw the videos of all the votes stacked up, all the back mail, because when the dude who runs the post office went out of the news a month and a half ago, that don't mean he stopped working. He just changed tactic. You know what I'm saying? I can't come up here talking. Let me just be quiet. Okay, yeah, we'll put the machines back. Yeah, we'll put the ballot boxes back. And then let me get out the news so we can continue to get this thing close enough to steal. But at any rate, Pennsylvania said if it's postmarked before the 3rd of November, you can count it for up to 9 days. Supreme Court is like, yeah, we can't really get at them because it's a state Supreme Court ruling and no federal court ruled on it. So what we're going to say is it's still a 4-4 tie. And why is it a 4-4 tie? I thought you swore in the handmaid. Well, they swore the handmaid in, but what the court PR people told the press was Comey Barrett did not have time to brief and read. But when you read the opinion, why they did it, because they didn't write an opinion, but when you write the justices who decided they wanted to write, what you read in there, Alito says, you know what? This is not to say that if you come back to this court with a motion not to count those votes that come in after the 3rd, even though they were postmarked before the 3rd, this is not to say that we should not. In fact, we should review that. So this is the move they did. If on November the 3rd, it looked like the vote is going for Trump, the Republican Party who controls the Pennsylvania State Legislature, they're not going back to the courts. If it looks like the vote is for Biden, they're going to go back to the court. And what this racist Alito then told them is, come on back. The handmaid's here now. We got a 6-3, and we're going to run a Boston on y'all. In other words, they are setting it up to steal by deciding state by state if they're going to count the the mail-in vote ballots that come in, even though they're postmarked before the 3rd, if they come in after the 3rd. So I went through all that, and I know we're gonna really get to the other stuff now. I went through all that to say this. When you read Ron Walter's book, and there's a shelf, there's a library of books. Notice we got 2 1/3 centuries of thinking about these things, of struggle, and people who have spent time thinking about it. Ron Walters wrote this book in 2003. And what he does in this book, the last chapter, is the integrity of Black interest. In fact, let me just go to 249 and let him speak for himself. He says, embedded in the white nationalist ideology is the goal of achieving as much, quote unquote, freedom from government intervention as possible. Meaning, you're not going to interfere with the interests of white nationalism. He doesn't mean states' rights. He doesn't mean local government. He means white nationalism. So if it's white nationalism, if local government helps, that's what we're for. If intervening in state constitutions mean, that's what we're for. In other words, we're advancing our interests. Second sentence, the last sentence I'll read. For people of African descent, this has meant white nationalists are free to inflict considerable damage upon them through the unbridled use of their group's power. What does that mean? That means that are the Democrats, don't think about this like it's a movie. This isn't Black people. It's Black people versus white nationalism always. So stop thinking when we instead don't take out Black people and put in Democrat, and don't take out white nationalism and put in Republican. No, it's Black. See this here? Black interests versus white nationalism. So if we go into the game and we say, okay, what side are we on? We're always on Black interest side. What's the game? The game is Republicans versus Democrats. Okay, well, I'm not playing. Hold on. You do realize that one of the things that's being decided is something that's going to affect you. Oh, well, shit, which one of these teams I'm signing up with? Let me go sign up with the Democrat. See, you're a Democrat. No, fool. Did you? What part of this don't you understand? You know what I'm saying? Now, I'm sure somebody can write torch the comments. I'm sure my friends who like to stay up and make little videos and tip out little things that we talk about, Micah. But let's
do they?
Oh yeah, you know that. You know that. Oh, yeah, but it's okay because at the end of the day, we've got to always advance Black interests. And what Ron Walters is saying at this is that white nationalism invades the American political system in order to advance its interests. And so it relies on those who are white, who believe that there's a system other than white nationalism. It relies on them to politely kind of coddle white nationalism. That's Chuck Schumer and them. In other words, well, you know, the institution of the Senate, dude, it ain't no institution. Why you keep talking to these people like y'all colleagues? These guys are playing. You understand? I know you want to be nice. I know that's why y'all have the rules where you can't talk about any other people. I know that's when one of us decides that we can't take it no more. You want to censor us. You want to chastise us. But that both sides, there ain't no institutions. There's white nationalism and there's those who oppose it. And what they've done now, and he goes through this in great detail in this book, what they've done now is invade this system enough so that what we've got to decide next week or in these days, I think now early voting has ended, as I said, in most places, but it's still a lot of places like, I think today may be the last day in North Carolina. What we've got to decide is what action will be in our best short-term interest. And then, if the Democrats win next week, then whatever, those 7 categories or those 6 categories or those 15 categories, however you want to chop it up, that's when you're going to see the beef emerge. That's when you're going to see people come out and say, hey, Joe, public option. Let's move, bro. Let's go. Hey, green jobs. Let's go. And you're going to see some of the conservative people in the Democratic Party say, oh, no, no, And that's when you're going to see the thing. But let's get to that. Because what you don't want to be at is Stephen Miller got ideology tests for your cousins and them trying to get here over in Nigeria. And they stop them at JFK and say, let me ask you a question. I see your last name is Muhammad. Yes. All my papers are in order. Now, papers, that was November the 2nd. This November the 20th.
Oh, my God.
Ain't no papers. Now, I know all you Pan-African heroes that are talking about both parties are the same. I'm walking you through what's life as it is, not life as you've read it. I mean, because guess what? You know how they got rid of Marcus Garvey? Deported him on a federal charge that was bullshit, but they still put him out. So before you quote Garvey, go back and read the history of how they got rid of Marcus Garvey and use some Negroes to help them do it, who they were also against. A. Philip Randolph on the Garvey must go side. Garvey must go. Yeah, and J. Edgar Hoover called A. Philip Randolph the most dangerous Negro in America because he was a socialist and opening his mail and all this kind of stuff. Try to put his wife out of business in Chicago because they were fueling the Brotherhood of Sleeper Car Porters and Chambermaids through her beauty parlors. So what do? They send people out in Chicago, Negroes, to hand out flyers talking about her husband is a communist. So, therefore, so before y'all start wading out in the middle of arguments with T-shirt slogans, go back. And I'm being deliberately provocative here for a reason. We can't have now people running out in the street shouting stuff and confusing people who haven't either had the opportunity or taken the time to look at it a little closer. We have to have serious conversations now. Over half the vote from 2016, those people have already voted. Now the question is going to be, how are those votes counted for the people who have already voted? Those people who voted in person, their vote is going in. Those people who thinking, okay, it's Saturday. If I mail it today, it should get there by Tuesday. No more mail. You understand? Everybody listen, no more mail. If somebody was saying, oh, really? No more mail? No more mail. Walk it in. But I don't have no way to get there. Make a phone call. Because this is where the black bourgeoisie, like myself, and I put myself in the black bourgeoisie, not because of my bank account, but because I got 4 degrees. And I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. And so I know the Negroes going to put me in the bourgeoisie anyway. But guess what? If the old lady can't get to the polls, I'm supposed to call the National Pan-Hellenic. Because I'm going to promise you right now, if the Alphas don't come get her, I know what the Deltas and the AKAs and the Zetas and Sigma Gamma Rho doing. Because they black women, they out here got pets lined up. Say, hey, did you vote? But I don't know. Where's your master? You got a ballot? These black women is not bullshit. You understand? So if you don't have a ride, look it up on the internet. Somebody coming to get you. And that's not to say versus black men. I'm saying in tandem with black community. We trust these sisters to do it, but don't mail it. Get it in. And then the lawyers are going to fight because if it's close enough to steal in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and watch this, it's coming up close now, Texas, Georgia, because them Negroes in Harris County, Texas, where my mama is, and my sister and brother-in-law and niece and nephew, them Negroes have already voted. They voted more already in person early voting than the total number in 2016 in Harris County. Because that white nationalist governor of Texas said, I'm gonna bust out and say you get one place to drop your ballot off. So guess what? They ain't even giving them the chance. Because in 2016, they flipped Harris County and elected all these black and brown
judges,
elected officials. You know what I'm saying? Have you talked to Karen? I don't know if you talked to any of them. I know there's a Latina sister who is the chief judge in Harris County. She's the highest
they elected 16 black judges. One of them passed away. I had a bunch of them on the show, on my radio show on Sirius XM. Amazing what happened in Harris County. I had a woman that was running for the Senate on the show too. She didn't make it through the primary, but yeah, Harris County Texas is up for grabs. So is Florida.
It's up for grabs, and so is Florida. Karen, that's so important, what you just said. I mean, are y'all listening? This is another reason. I tell you, and again, I keep saying this, but it's important that it keep being said. We keep saying it. That's the reason one of the many reasons I'm very grateful for this space that you've created and that you're creating. This is the type of conversation, informed conversation, that is lifeblood to our people. So if you don't mind, I mean, when you talk to them, how important is this engagement in the political process to advance our interests, which have nothing to do with the political apparatus we're using and everything to do with what's in our best interest. How important was it to put these officials in place in Harris County in your mind?
I mean, you talk about judges all the time, 16 Black women judges
Wow.
in a state that still has cotton fields where they still send people in prison out to pick cotton. You tell me.
That's it.
And in Florida, where so many people were disenfranchised and then they tried to hit them with a poll tax, how important is it to have elected officials who are going to say, no, you can vote.
That's right.
It's important.
That's right. And you must vote. That actually, that's good, Karen, because that actually helps us understand as well where everybody plays their role in a collective. So Florida, for example, as you said, got the ballot initiative through. The Florida legislature, controlled by Republicans, figures out a way to basically use the criminal conviction as a poll tax, because that's really what they're doing. Saying, well, no, you may be out of jail, you're on parole or on parole, but you have to now pay all the court affiliated costs. Because some of these costs are, well, I don't have a job yet. I mean, no problem. Until you do that, you can't vote. But the people of Florida said, we don't give a damn what the people of Florida said. The white nationalist party, through gerrymander and everything else, controls the legislature. And so therefore, so then what? How much is the bill? Well, you owe $438. Okay, what about you? Now, guess what? Here is where somebody comes in and says, you know what? I'm not a federal judge. I didn't do the ballot initiative like the brother in Florida who says I'm going to recover my voting rights after formally, returning citizens. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm a basketball player. But guess what? Y'all pay me a lot of money to play basketball. You know what? How much is the bill? I'm going to play my role. That's LeBron James. Do y'all understand? See, everybody got a role. So people shouldn't be out here saying, oh, you're entertained, you ain't got no opinion. No. That ain't about that. If we're talking collective, everyone has a role. Okay, I don't have the money. Excuse me. I have the money and I have something else too. What? I have a platform. See all these people out here who love watching me play basketball? I'm going to go over them saying, you made a lot of money off me playing basketball. You just like taking your picture, with me. That's very nice. Okay, I'm going to need $100,000 from you. I'm going to need $50,000 from you. I'm going to need $200 from you. I'm going to need $1 million from you. And so LeBron James gets the thing together. Guess what? This is a man that knows his role. You understand? I'm going to play that role. Now, that doesn't mean that LeBron James, after he retires, can't go get a law degree and go practice law and end up being on the Supreme Court. It doesn't mean that. In fact, the guy I'm wearing right here, this guy was an All-American football player. This guy was Phi Beta Kappa at Rutgers, graduated top of his class. The man went to Columbia Law School and got a law degree. Quit practicing law because his wife was like, yeah, great singing voice, you're a great actor. Come on, I'm going to manage you. Let's move. Becomes the biggest theater movie star and recording artist in the world. Then turns around and says, you got to get rid of these nuclear weapons. And the Soviet Union said they may get rid of theirs if you get rid of yours. You know what? I'm for peace. At which point the government he grew up in turns on him and he has to go to the House Un-American Activity Committee and they ask him if he's a communist. And his response is, my father was a slave. We built, and I'm going to have a piece of this country. None of you fascists going to run me away. And all the Negroes, respectable Negroes, turn from him. But the masses don't turn from him and his wife. And ultimately his passport is restored and he travels around the world. This is the man that influenced Harry Belafonte. This is the man that influenced and was friends with W.E.B. Du Bois, who respected Du Bois so much. While people are quoting Du Bois's 1950-some article, Why I Won't Vote. You should go read a little deeper about W.E.B. Du Bois, who ran for Senate, actually, in New York State on a third-party ticket. There are places where you can say that, and like Washington, D.C., or where I am, Maryland, that's cool. But somebody's listening to you in Georgia. And somebody's listening to you in Texas, and somebody's listening to you in South Carolina, and that might be the vote that gets it just in the threshold of steal. So Alito and Clarence Thomas and Amy Coney Barrett and Justice McGonnell Gorsuch and Justice Beer Kavanaugh got 5 now. And guess what? John Roberts, who's weeping tears now because his precious Supreme Court is now occupied by the white nationalist party, and he can't do nothing about it. He can count. Once you count to 5, it's over. With a Democrat in there, you can actually think, there's no number. There's no number for people on the Supreme Court. So, I think we should expand, and we should expand the federal courts as well, the courts of appeal, and maybe the district courts. You can't do that. We got the numbers, Mitch. So this is what we're not going to do no more. We're not going to sit and be like, and then my colleague from Kentucky is concerned. No, there ain't no colleagues. Ain't no colleagues. Sweet Lindsay, Lil Lynn from South Carolina, that ignored the Senate rules and pushed your handmaid through, even though you're not supposed to be able to do that without the quorum and none of the Democrats were there, guess what? When it flips, if you're still in the Senate, because somebody in South Carolina turned off them fools talking about it's the same party. Right. And put Jamie Harrison in. And Jamie Harrison, let's be clear, is in that Hakeem Jeffries lane. So just because he wins don't mean he gonna vote to expand the court. You're gonna have to light a little fire under him and remind him that's a 6-year term, bruh. Don't worry about re-election. Let's put a little heart in you when you show up over there, and you go on and vote the right way. And we'll worry about re-election in year 5. Because by then, a bunch more of these babies gonna have turned 18, and they ain't never gonna win another election in South Carolina or Georgia or Texas. And that's why they fighting so hard in 2020, because they know this is the last election they can have close enough to steal, because all them babies y'all been having the last 10, 15 years, many of them gonna be 18 in 2024, and you get a little step closer to building the kind of society where you can then say the United States government has dropped all the barriers to having dual citizenship. Now, I'm sorry, ADOS, I don't know about y'all. My people came out of enslavement, but I'd like to have a passport, a Nigerian passport, a Ghanaian passport, a South African passport. I'm gonna get all them passports. Now, y'all can stay here with your red, white, and blue passport and keep begging these people to see you and feel seen and all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna get some more passports, because I'm gonna tell you what makes the American passport stronger for you. When the Nigerians come in and say, I understand that the police shot one of our nationals last night in Kansas City. Oh, watch how quick that helps you in your local struggle, ADOS. So you got to understand the world as it is, not the world as somebody told you in a 20-minute video. And then understand how we have made progress in the past. But I'm going to pause, because it's 10 after. And we're supposed to talk about comic books. And that's enough of that talk. Unless you want to.
Well, I just wanted to underline that the arrogance and hubris of Harry Reid is why there was no quorum when the Democrats had the Senate, thinking that they were going to have it forever. They were short-sighted. They underestimated these people. We shall not underestimate them. We've been watching them for 400 years. We know what they're capable of. We have been literally under their knee. And we will not underestimate them. We will not be childish in the way in which we move in the world. We're going to be very cerebral and sober and move forward. And I wanted to take this pause today because I know as we head into next week, it's going to be stressful, maybe. Yeah. Even though I do think Biden's going to win in a landslide, I do think that maybe we won't know that night. Maybe we will. I don't know what unrest is going to come out of a Biden victory. I think there will be. So I just need us to just let our hair down and just relax a little bit and love on one another. And I know that you love comic books, so I wanted to take the day to just, celebrate you and your love of comics, and also kind of like as a, a fine line for folk to be okay with being quote unquote nerds, be okay with just liking frivolous things that people think are frivolous. But I think that the television watching, the comic books, the novels, all of that builds you as a person and rounds you out.
I agree. So let's okay. So then good. Let's spend some time on that. You're right. And thank you for, I love celebrating me. We get to celebrate each other and celebrate us, because there's a lot of people who are into this. In fact, let me ask you, Karen, do you remember your first encounter with a comic book?
No, I actually am not a comic book fan.
You said that before.
Yeah, I'm not. I watched the comic strips, like Hagar the Horrible and Beetle Bailey, and
me too.
Yeah, so I grew up on that and doing a little crosswords in the back of the comic. Like, I love newspapers. Yeah. My dad loved to read newspapers, so I would get the comics on Saturday or Sunday. They'd come on Saturday. Sunday I would go read those comic strips, but I was not a comic book person at all. So
you said that before. I remember you said it before. We were talking in class. So many folks who were listening and watching now remember Karen said that. And all comics is sequential storytelling, visual storytelling in sequence. And as we talked about when we talked about comics a little while ago, just for briefly, we know that Africans have been doing that since the beginning of humanity. And the highest form, after cave paintings and things like that, where you see the stories in sequence, or at least see the gestures towards stories, the form that we've seen in terms of the kind of early perfection of the sequence storytelling is the Egyptians. So when you go in the tombs and temples of Egypt, you're looking at sequential storytelling. That's what that is. They're telling stories. I mean, so it is the form that comics use. Now,
but I wanted to know about you. You know, you love music.
Yes.
Apparently,
Oh, I see.
You apparently can rap, because we already did, kind of like the history of comic books. But I just want to make time and space for what makes Great Carr smile in your soul. Like what?
Oh, I see. Okay. I'll tell you. As a child, just like a lot of Black folks, and I know there's a lot of Black people watching today who remember those. We talked about the encyclopedias that would come in your house. There was a set that it took me being an adult and acquiring them to know where they came from. They were produced by the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History, the history of Black Americans. Several Black institutions created those kind of things in the 1960s and 70s. There was a set that was produced by Ebony Magazine, a lot of things. But in the ones that Asala did, there were Black and white representations of a comic that was actually drawn by the great Tom Feelings. This is actually Tom Feelings. In fact, let me just take this here. I'll take the dust jacket off so you can see Tom Feelings. We showed this picture before. We talked about him before. I think we even showed this book before. This is the book Tommy Traveler, right? The World of Black History. Tommy Traveler in the World of Black History. As a child, growing up in Nashville, my parents had these encyclopedias, and that was really, looking back, that was my introduction to Black history as such. And so, I remember the Crispus Attucks story because it's a little boy who's reading. We talked about this too in class with Carr. He's reading, he goes to sleep, he wakes up, he's on this ship, and he's working as Crispus Attucks. So many years later, I was very fortunate to have come across the actual comic books that Tom Feelings illustrated, and these are the ones that many people remember, I'm sure. Y'all remember the Golden Legacies, right? There's the comic book, Crispus Attucks and the man. There he is giving that work. I mean, not just.
Because the history says he just got shot. He
did, and Attucks is in the wrong place at the wrong time. But when you're a child, Crispus Attucks, who was a grown man in his 50s, whose folks came out of the Caribbean, who's in Boston because it was then as now an international city, and the Black people there, many of them came out of the Caribbean. Prince Hall from Barbados, all them. He gets caught up because this is the police. This police violence. This is it's the British. Yeah, the British were the ones in charge of Boston. It was their colony, Massachusetts colony. So therefore, the police action, they shot down Attucks and his friends in the so-called Boston massacre. And I've stood at the grave of Crispus Attucks in Boston. And he's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yes. And in fact, these cops, and I'm calling them cops because they were the police of the time, were defended by John Adams, who ended up being the second president of the United States. John Adams said, well, I only shot a bunch of Jack Tars, saucy boys, and Negroes. So, and they were being rowdy. So, but anyway, hopefully past is not prelude. But yeah, but as a child, all you know is it's a little Black boy look like me in this comic book. He's doing his stuff, and he goes to sleep, and he comes out. Here's the little boy. I'm coming, sir. I'm coming. So the kid look like me. And that's the important thing. And you see Attucks over here. Remember in Lovecraft when my man comes out in the Jackie Robinson, this is what that's what a child sees. You understand? I'll learn the history as an adult, but now I know Black people in there. And they had what? Ben Banneker, The Life of Benjamin Banneker, right? Golden Legacy. I mean, all of them, you see the different ones. I won't go through all of them, but
pause on Benjamin Banneker for a second, because I don't think people know the depth of that man and the impact on culture, history, and everything. That one man.
No, Benjamin Banneker. In fact, Benjamin Banneker. Look, there he is. My man's laying it out. Did the first working clock made out of wood in North America, colonial North America, and it worked until the day of his funeral. Because when he was being buried in Maryland, somehow mysteriously his house burnt down with all his papers in it. Oh, it's crazy what happened to Ben Banneker. But Banneker was an astronomer or surveyor when Pierre Lafont went back to France. He finished the job of laying out Washington, D.C. In fact, there's a great poem let me see it. It's not. Oh, the author escapes me at the time, but at the moment. But what the author writes about in this poem, and maybe it'll come to me before we get off the air today. Black arts movement poet. He writes about Banneker staying up all night, walking the land that will become Washington, D.C. while everybody else is asleep, and looking at the stars. Because D.C. is laid out very geometrically. You know, my man Tony Browder gives a tour called Egypt on the Potomac. A lot of it is Egyptian, really filtered through the Greek, but really Egyptian. And Banneker is surveying the land. He's mapping it out. He's mapping the angles, the lanes, how it radiates like the sun, the meridian, which is 16th Street. By the way, all my people, in fact, Lance Reynolds, who I mentioned earlier, they're going to be down in front of the White House tomorrow all day for a party. He said, Black Lives Matter Square, we can return it out. We all this momentum. We celebrating, right? We celebrating our momentum as we're building. But Banneker.
Is it Jay Wright? Is it Jay Wright? Is Jay Wright the poet? Jay Wright?
Jay Wright might be the one. It's actually in, if you go on the website of the Poetry Journal, it's called Poetry Foundation. It might be, it's a long poem. Is that the long? It's a very long poem. If you're looking at it, it might be the one because he's talking about how Banneker is just walking and looking at the stars, communing with the ancestors, and it just brings Banneker alive. There've been several big books on Benjamin Banneker, The Life of Benjamin Banneker, and it really talks about Banneker's genius as he created the almanac, so you know when to plant, the seasons. He sent them to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was so shook he never wrote Banneker back. He sent the stuff to another dude. It's like, what do you think about these kind of things? Hey, man, write the man back. And then Banneker writes him these letters and says, you know, sir, suffer me to your mind to remember the time when you and your comrades argued against the British, saying they were deprived of your rights. And at the same time, you deprived me and my kindred through the heinous act of the same rights. I mean, he's blistering Thomas Jefferson. This man had died in debt, the Donald Trump of his era in many ways. Although I won't put that on Jefferson because he actually had a brain, but he definitely was in debt, like Trump is in debt. But Banneker is such an outsized figure. And another interesting thing about it is his grandfather, by all accounts, was taken from Africa, and he had come out of a royal line in Africa. Now, I don't mean everybody we talking about kings and queens. No, monarchy has a lot of problems, including African monarchy. So this isn't a celebration of everybody was a king, queen, because it's not true. And even if it was, who in the hell, we don't want kings and queens necessarily. We need new structures of government. But Banneker's grandfather apparently came out of a royal line, and he was purchased on the auction block in Maryland by his grandmother, who was a white Irish woman who had been sent to the United States instead of getting locked up because she was an indentured servant who had been accused of spilling some milk in a barn or something. Her name was Molly. Man, in fact, there's a children's book about her. But anyway, I'm looking over it because I know it's over there somewhere, but no need to go get it now. She then gets sent to America. She busts her tail, gets some land. In fact, think of Molly Banneker in some ways in the Sean Connery line. She's part of one of those subjects of the British, you know, but she's white. And she gets something when she comes to America that all people from Ireland or Scotland or any of these European nations get. It's called whiteness. That's what creates a lot of the confusion. So she buys her Banneker, who is Benjamin Banneker's grandfather, on the auction block. In fact, the comic book doesn't talk about this. This starts with, oh yeah, watch this. I love this. Look, this is him. He gonna build this first wooden clock. So first thing he comes up on the white dude. Ben notices Joseph Levy's watch. Is that a timepiece? Yes, a watch. He said, I've never seen a watch or a clock, though I've helped build a sundial for our school. Could you explain to me how it works? Well, I'll do better than that. Lend you the watch. Then you can study its movements. Okay. Liberal white guy going to help. Back home. The episode with the crops is soon replaced with Ben's mind by the watch. Later that evening, hello, Mr. Heinrich. Ben, come in. He says, Ben tells Peter Heinrich of his interest in the watch. The key is in how the watch works, moves. If I could discover how this force works, I could make other things move in the same way. Or you could make a clock that chimes the hour and we wouldn't have to import them anymore. Yes, surely there are rules, formulas. So Banneker starts working. Oh, there he is. Boom. Enlarging them and carving every piece out of the sounding device, out of wood, until he built his own clock that chimed. Benjamin Banneker built the first clock in the British colonies, and every piece in the clock was made from wood. He took the dude's watch apart. I ain't never seen no watch. Could you show me how? Yeah. Oh, okay. I got you. All right. Yeah. Takes wood. Makes everything in that watch, the metal pieces of it, makes everything out of wood, except he don't make a clock. He don't make a watch. The dude made a standing clock. Enlarged all the pieces. You know what kind of mind it takes? It takes something this big and make it this big. Makes the clock. It chimes on the hours. It never loses time. Doesn't lose a second. Doesn't lose a minute. And works up until the day of his funeral, when some of the great grandparents of these white nationalists burned his whole house down with the clock in it and all his papers when he dies. So you can imagine.
Because they didn't want anyone to duplicate what he did. And he was leaving institutional knowledge that they didn't want us to build on.
Oh, Karen. Now that's heartbreaking. Yes. So that's Banneker, right? So the golden legacy, and
pause, because I'm not done. I'm not done knowing about Benjamin Banneker.
Okay.
Because what, as we celebrate gangsters and drug dealers, where's the documentary? Where's the movie? Where's the feature film? Where's the series on this brother? So what happened after his grandfather was purchased? Did he?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Come on, now you leaving out.
My bad. I thought you're right. That's wrong. I should do that. Okay, I wish I could put my hands on either the Banneker book or Molly Banneker, which is a great little. I'm gonna take a risk. Most of my children's books are in another room, and I'd be looking through other stuff. So let me just summarize it very quickly, because this is unbelievable. Although it's very believable because we know Black people. And to those of you who are filmmakers, and we both have a lot of friends. You got more friends than I do in the movie industry. Yeah, because you interview them, you talk to them all the time. I was watching last week when you got these cats sitting up. I'm like, yeah, Common. Imagine Common. He gonna play Banneker. So I was watching you talk to Common about voting, right? So let's see. We got brother Lonnie from Chicago, a member of my dear brother Baba J, Jeremiah Wright's church, Trinity. In fact, Jeremiah Wright often says when Common comes to church and he's in town, he come to church, and I was giving my sermons, I'll be preaching, I look up, I see Common, we lock eyes, I nod, he nod. When I finish, he comes up and he basically translates my entire sermon through verse. He said, that's the genius of Common. He could take what I said in the sermon and then get the musicians behind him and spit a verse that encompasses everything I said. So let's imagine this Common. He's playing Banneker's grandfather, Banneker, that's his name, standing on the block. And we could pick a white woman. Y'all can decide who y'all want to be the white woman playing Molly. She sees him. She buys him. And then, as Donald Trump would say, a short period of time. I don't know how many months it was. I don't remember now off the top of my head. She frees him. He's not only a good worker, she finds out the guy is a genius. And the things work. And more importantly, she frees him because she fell in love with him. Then they get married in Maryland. And watch this. The reason I'm calling her Molly Banneker, because she took his name as her last name. He passes away after they have a couple of children, one of whom is their daughter. Their daughter is the mother of Benjamin Banneker, who was born before his own grandmother, the white woman Molly Banneker from Ireland, passed. And it was from his grandmother that Benjamin Banneker heard the stories of her husband, his grandfather, who was a surveyor of the stars because it was information and a technique he had learned when he was in Africa. So Benjamin Banneker's penchant for astronomy did not come from Europe. It came from the Africans who watched the stars in his grandfather's homeland. So as we drive the streets of Washington, D.C., and talk about Pierre L'Enfant, who is buried at Arlington National Cemetery atop the hill looking down. They say, oh, here is the land he surveyed. L'Enfant went back to France and he was a drunk. I ain't gonna get into Pierre L'Enfant. In fact, there's a L'Enfant Plaza when you come up LaFont Plaza, you run right into the Smithsonian Castle. By the way, the red stone of the Smithsonian Castle was quarried by enslaved Africans. Jefferson Davis was one of the members of the first Smithsonian Board of Governors. But anyway, we'll get the story for another day. Pierre LaFont Plaza comes up. But at the end of LaFont Plaza, at the very beginning, near the water, and then it stretches all the way through, and then it comes through the city, and then on the other side of the White House, of course, 16th Street, the Meridian. At the beginning, at the head of LaFont Plaza, there is, to use the old gospel parlance from the old gospel song, there is a fountain. It ain't filled with blood, though. It's filled with water. And the fountain is Benjamin Banneker Monument. So the Banneker Monument is the beginning of LaFont Plaza. Because LaFont went home. Banneker, the one, finished the job. So, yeah, so that was his grandfather. Yes, he got that surveying honest. He got it from his grandfather, who then passed it on. Then the daughter's son is Benjamin Banneker, and that's how Banneker is raised. Banneker is raised in Maryland as a farmer, surveyor, this kind of thing. And of course, he comes into what becomes the District of Columbia once the United States federal government decides they can't have Philadelphia or New York serve as the political capital. New York is the financial capital. Philadelphia was the place that had the first the president's house. That's where Ona Judge and Hercules and them ran away from George Washington's enslaving ass. And so then they said, now we need to have a place that don't belong to anybody yet. So they drug out of a swamp. I'm doing this not because I'm Jay-Z Hove, no, because they made a perfect diamond drawing it out of parts of Maryland and Virginia. And that's the District of Columbia, and which old black nationalists know. Y'all know this. They don't refer to Washington, D.C. as Washington, D.C. They call it Banneker City. In fact, the black nationalists in the 60s and 70s renamed many of the cities. They don't call it Philadelphia. They call it Richard Allen. They don't call it Baltimore. That's Tubman City. And if you ever hear the old head black folk talk about Banneker, they're talking about Washington, D.C. So, yeah, that's no. I mean, and Golden Legacy had all of these. In fact, I'll just show you one more. This is volume 11. In fact, since we talked about Banneker, let me do one other thing. Well, two other things. This is the cover, but look at the back. Something for everyone from Avon. See, the company at your Golden Legacy, a bicentennial gift in recognition of a great heritage. I was 11 years old. Avon is a white company. Now, of course, a lot of black women made money on Avon now. The Avon lady, I knew Avon ladies at church, like Mary Kay. You can get their money now. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that my mama ever used Avon, although she bought Avon, because sometimes you buy stuff because somebody black selling it, right? So, but look at that. See? Black people, come on now. And so then, but this is the other thing I was going to show you. Here is had to be careful because these are fragile. This is the Golden Legacy Advisory Board, publisher and editor, Bertram Fitzgerald, artist, Joan Backus, Tom Feelings, there he is, Ezra Jackson, very important cartoonist as well. Joan Backus and Francis Taylor wrote, but the consultant is Benjamin Quarles. Benjamin Quarles was a professor of history at Morgan State for a number of years. Benjamin Quarles was the man. Negro History Bulletin. We had to do a whole thing on the NHB. Very important. But look at the letter they're talking about. Those of you will pause it probably in the video. We won't read it now. You can pause it and see. They're thanking people. Issue contains endorsements from representatives of the New York City Board of Education, NAACP, National Urban League, Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, and Dr. Benjamin Quarles, eminent historian and professor of history at Morgan State College. These are black institutions. Yeah, let Avon pay for it, but you got to go to the black institutions for the expertise. So, you know, those who want to make a movie, y'all cast somebody for Banneker and make a hell of a Benjamin Banneker movie. Get somebody good for his grandfather. Cast it with all new talent. And let some of these people with money fund that. And then if you want to write some companion comic books, go to the black high schools and the HBCUs and get your illustrators and get your historians, and let's do an all black thing. And then if you want somebody to write the bill, go get Jack Dorsey to drop $10 million from Twitter. Who knows? I mean, anyway, let them pay for it if you want, but let's do it. We have everything we need. In fact, we even got the money, but you know, let them pay for it. Black Lives Matter. So as a child, then, you know, I'm reading, you know, that was my introduction, was the Tom Feelings stuff. And then, but I didn't know comic books. Because like you, we read what my daddy called the funny papers. So yeah, I mean, so the joy I got was when I went to Mr. Neely's drugstore, as I've told you before, and I'll keep this short because realizing, and I went in the comic book store and used to have the towers with all the comic books on them, little metal towers with the comic books. and I bought a Archie comic, took it back, and my daddy was like, and then funny book. And I was like, yeah, it's Archie. I see Archie in the comics, so I'm about the Archie book. I'm like, yeah, this ain't really good. I can read this. So I go back and I asked Mr. Neely if I could switch. Neely was an old black man, brother. He worked hard, built his little drugstore, had the comic book rack in there. He ain't gonna bother no little knucklehead black kid. Can I? Yeah, I don't care. Just make sure it costs the same. All right. At that time, I think they were 25 cents. They were a nickel. I mean, not a nickel. They were 25 cents a quarter. And that's big money for me. So I switched. I switched because I saw the Black Panther in, they were fighting for the evil eye of Dormammu in the Avengers Defenders War. But then, see, this is how they get you in comic books, right? Because then you buy one and you realize, wait, this is number what? Avengers Defenders number what? 9? And I wrote about it in Ty Burrow's book, the afterward to his book on Black Panther. The best book, as far as I'm concerned, on Black Panther, Todd Stephen Burroughs. And I said, damn, now I got to get the other ones. And then this one, they come out every month. Then I figured out when the comic books come in, now I got to follow the Avengers Defenders War. The problem is the Avengers and the Defenders are two separate comic books. So therefore, I got to buy the next Avengers, I got to buy the next Defenders, and that's what got me hooked up on comics, and I've been hooked ever since. So I went to, Black Panther didn't have his book yet. He had a book called Jungle Action. We have to do a whole thing on Black Panther because, in fact, there are a number of books. If y'all want to read more about Black Panther, this is a good one. Black Panther, The Illustrated History of a King, the complete comics chronology. Dennis Culver's book is very good. It takes you through the whole thing. If you want one for younger people, perhaps a little audience, this is a good one. Marvel Black Panther, The Ultimate Guide. It takes you through all the comics from the beginning. And so I just show you a couple more of the ones that I really, this is a great one. Imagine as a child, because you remember this dude, right? Evel Knievel. Remember Knievel jumping, we were kids. Remember Evel Knievel was, white dude, Vegas, had the big things. We children, we watching on TV. Is he going to make it jumping across with motorcycle? He was in a rocket one time or something like that. But that's less important. What's important is there ain't no jungles in Africa, mind you, in terms of topography. They're rainforests, jungles in Latin America, but Jungle Action. This was the book. So they give this guy the book, and he puts the Black Panther as the star in Jungle Action. It's jungles, right? But check this one out. This is 25 cents. Number 19, beginning an all-new Panther epic. In the heart of civilization, T'Challa battles the primitive power of the Klan. He putting an ass whooping on the Klan. Because his girlfriend, sacrifice of blood, his girlfriend been kidnapped by the Klan. Now, they don't spell it with a K because they being subversive. This is from 1975. I was 10 years old. So as a child, now, of course, this is being tongue-in-cheek civilization. This is Stephen Miller and them, if y'all want to kind of keep track. But anyway, the point is that the Black Panther in the 1970s, along with Luke Cage, along with the Falcon, along with these heroes, these for a black kid, and now at 10 years old, I'm old enough to start earning my own money, bagging groceries, things like that. But for us in Nashville, in the South, it's a city, but it's also, spaced out. You can cut grass. So grass cutting money from 10 years old to the time I went to college. Grass cutting money went from 10, 11, 12, up till 16. Then it became fast food money. Arby's, Wendy's, Crystals. Those of you in the South know about Crystal hamburgers. I worked the graveyard shipping in Crystals up through my junior year in college. I went to work at 10 p.m., came out of work 6 a.m., took a shower, went to class. Went back to the dorm, took a shower, went to class. But the point is this, that money every Wednesday faithfully from then to now, some of that money went to buying comic books. And so and I'm just giving people sources now if they want to, Sheena Howard has written a very good little book called, big book called The Encyclopedia of Black Comics. She's at Rider University. Very good book to help you, everything you want to know about Black comics. Here's another one that she edited with Ronald Jackson. My friend Ronald Jackson was at Penn State. That's now University of Cincinnati. Black Comics, Politics of Race and Representation, edited by Sheena Howard and Ronald Jackson. Very important, those two books. But for me personally, as you say, in terms of my journey, comics is where I started learning vocabulary. You know, the Mandarin fighting Iron Man, call him a son of a fatherless dog, and he says, "You Cretan, I gotta go look Cretan up." You know, what is a Cretan? You know what I'm saying? I mean, so between that and the Bible and church, the power of language is there, but it's tied to moving images. And when you start thinking about that for the rest of us, then I started finding these other comics, and there are far too many to talk about today. But I'll mention this because there are people probably in class today with us who are from my and your parents' generation. And, you know, here's a facsimile copy of All Negro Comics. This is the first comic written, illustrated, and published by an African-American staff, 1947. And so, you know, it's got the stereotype stuff in it and this kind of things. This one was 15 cents. And you got some crazy stuff. Black people did this to other black people. You see him chasing his child. I mean, children in danger and representing what they thought Africa was. That's a tired theme in minstrelsy and in postcards and all this kind of stuff, always endangering black children. But what you see in here is a more subtle take on it. It isn't always, well, anyway, I won't get too deep into that. But as I started collecting, it was almost always Marvel. So in the 70s and then 80s, I started, you know, Black Panther eventually got its own book. And then I started reading the Avengers real heavy. And the reason I came to the Avengers, as I said, was because T'Challa, the Panther, was in there. I came in through the black people. And then the Falcon, you know, I started reading Captain America because the Falcon was in it and he was black. I started reading Luke Cage because Luke Cage was black. And so the Falcon is an interesting character because I guess it was Captain America, maybe 175 in the original in the series in the 70s. They go to Wakanda, and I'm loving this because, you know, black people, we're rooting for black people. Even when we haven't had a developed historic philosophy of history, we see somebody look like us, we're rooting for them. So you see Captain America, Steve Rogers, you know, blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, he's in there. T'Challa is his friend. They talking whatever. Sam Wilson is there, the Panther. They know each other from the Avengers. They enter Wakanda. And T'Challa is like, "Hey, man, what's going on? Hey, man, hang back for a minute. I'm going to do something." So then in the next page, you look over the panels, and here comes the Falcon. And Captain America's like, "What y'all been doing?" He said, "Showing." So the Falcon does like this, and he got these wings. Where you get them from? T'Challa hooked me up. That's where the Falcon's wings came from. Y'all watch these movies and the Falcon's flying, he's shooting stuff. T'Challa gave him them wings in the comic book. So as a kid, we're like, oh, we see these black men getting together. Captain America, that's cool. Many years later, when they told Captain America back, oh, wait a minute, hold on. Okay, yeah, I'll come to that in a second because I don't want to get too far. And I know we're taking a pause to talk about this, and I'm grateful that you've given me the chance to talk about some of this stuff. Oh, here we go. And let me tie this together. The 1970s, this is the commercial comics. We don't know about these independent people trying to write comics. By the 1980s, you get a few people writing independent comics. And I got some of those here. And then into the 90s, Static, Dwayne McDuffie. In fact, there's a very good 2-volume series called, this is volume 2. I didn't pull volume 1, called Black Comics. This is Black Comics Returns, volume 2.
Wow.
Yeah, this is John Jennings and Damian Duffy. They put this together to talk about, and they're incredible artists and comic book people on their own. They talk about all the independent comics and all the black artists and black women and black men who write all this stuff. And I'm gonna show y'all a few of those in a minute. But get Black Comics and Black Comics Returns. They're kind of hard. They need to bring them back into print. Black Comics itself, the first volume, is too expensive. It's really too expensive. But I'm mentioning them because we didn't know. We were buying Marvel or DC. And we were always side with Marvel because we like Marvel's characters better. Although DC had Black Lightning, and by the way, they're Warner Brothers. I mean, is it? No, it's the CW.
CW.
Yeah. Have you talked to any of the cast?
Of course, all of them. All of them.
I want to see what you think about Black Lightning. See, you say you ain't read comics, but you talk to.
I watch a lot of television. So Crestwood, you know, I know Crest from Scooter, Living Single. You know, and the daughters. The first season was the blackest thing I'd ever seen on television.
So black. The music was incredible.
But I couldn't keep up with it because it got too hokey.
Yeah.
And then the albino, I just like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, no, you're right.
But the first season, everything.
Yeah. And see, it's just what's so crazy about. I'm glad you said, Ken, because when I saw it was coming out, I was like, Because again, I knew Black Lightning from the comic books, and Black Lightning was not a well-developed character. DC had problems with his character. So when that's like you said, when they I heard that Barry White, and then they got Bill Withers, they got Nina. I'm saying now, Shonda Rhimes and them played with it with, what's the name of that? I about blocked that too, but
How to Get Away with Murder? What?
No. The Thomas Jefferson one.
Scandal.
Oh, Scandal. Yeah. The president in the clandestine affair with the black woman, right? Scandal. Yes. So, and the music, I used to get mad because, well, not mad because I don't have any expectations of television, but certainly not commercial television. But I used to say, this is the kind of, y'all using music, you're not even using it the way Curtis Mayfield used it in the soundtrack for Superfly, which was Curtis Mayfield wrote a soundtrack that critiqued the movie. I mean, when you watching the scenes and you hear the music is critiquing what you watching on the scene. You see them out there peddling dope. You see the guy get caught up in it, and then you hear Freddie's dead. And you're like, what is he doing? And then when he says, we can deal with rockets and dreams, but reality, what does it mean? Don't be misled, because Freddie's dead. But you watching the guys in Mayfield, but that ain't what they did in Scandal. You using this serious black music to promote the pathology on screen. But in Black Lightning, you done synced up the music. Man, you got black people ready to shed a tear when the boy gets shot in the street, or you come to tell him his son is dead. You got the right music playing. Oh my God. And you got the Bill Withers. Oh man, and you don't have what you would expect. When you maybe it's the lateness of the hour. Makes me feel lonelier than I am. But in my heart there is a shower. Hope you'll be happier with him. That dude from Slab Fort, West Virginia, Bill Withers. Now, how y'all got this laid in here? And he hits that damn blue. You playing the blues in Black Lightning. You Negroes, whoever did this, now, whatever happened between the husband and wife collaborative team, okay, that's for the gossip, and y'all talk about it on the Breakfast Club. But I'm going to tell you right now, last night I saw a superhero. He was black. This is for the streets. Black Lightning's back. And I'm saying, and that sister, the Brit, who plays his wife, Lynn, I didn't realize until, I guess you interviewed her too. I didn't realize she was British.
Yeah, I did not interview her. She was the one I didn't. The two brothers and Cress.
She's probably overseas. Yeah. And the sister, Nafisa Williams, she's from Philly. So I'm like, it was a beautiful thing. So, but Black Lightning, I didn't really collect Black Lightning. We didn't do the DC stuff, right? Because it seemed like they were just kind of, but Marvel always had more of a kind of a social orientation. And then when they get to the 1990s, Marvel goes back to those black characters and starts giving the backstories that they had previewed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, for example, Captain America. Now, people watching the movies know Captain America got the super soldier serum, and that's how he became Captain America. But we in America, black people, so you already know that they didn't experiment on him. They knew the serum would work. Why? Because they tested on test subjects, and you know who the test subjects were. So they decide, truth, Captain America. They make the backstory of Captain America a riff on the Tuskegee experiment. They doped up all these brothers with the super soldier serum, and all of them died except one. The brother who lived was the black Captain America, or better yet, the brother who lived was Captain America, World War II. Steve Rogers is the white Captain America. And then they bring it forward in one of the junior superhero groups when his grandson, Isaiah, decides he gonna be the patriot. Because the old man now lives in New York, and the old man is like, I was Captain America. Really? The grandson gets powers. So the grandson shows up. He's like a 14, 15-year-old. He shows up, tells Steve Rogers, give me the shield. It's my grandfather's shield. Who are you? What? He finds out Captain America, who preceded him, is alive, And he's like, oh, wow, okay. So the young boy becomes the Patriot. He's in the Junior Avengers. Young Avengers is what they call it. The Patriot, some of the other children of superheroes. And then to tie a knot on that, and those of you who read comic books know that Storm and Black Panther got married. And so Storm and Black Panther get married. They get married in, which is why I'm wondering how they're going to pull it.
Halle Berry?
Oh, no. This, we don't know who they're going to cast. It won't be Halle.
Oh, I know. I'm saying Storm is always going to be Halle Berry to me. I don't know.
Oh, then that, well, which is why it's going to be very interesting, because it'll be interesting because now, you know, Disney got to make all the money. And now that they've settled about, by the way, we talked about that as well. In fact, I didn't pull Blade because, well, I had a few Blades, but I don't know if I pulled any of them around here. Let me see if I had some Blades right here. No. But Blade, of course, is a vampire. Blade was British. He's British in the comic books. And so what you see, it's very interesting when you see the black superheroes get together. When Marvel reboots Black Panther, and let me see if I pulled some of the black, because I want to end with, at least for now, some of these conversations. I want to talk a little. Oh, wait, here was one of the early independent comic books, Brother Man, Dictator of Discipline. See, I mean, this is just a couple of them. I had a whole run, but it was written by, produced by Black people in during the hip hop era, the 80s and 90s. They did their own gear. They did their own, and by now I'm a grown man, right? In fact, and oh wait, here, you can order your copies directly from them. There go some of the other copies. The excitement continues. And of course, at this point, they were $2 a piece. This is during the hip hop era. Black independent comics, written, produced by Black people. Very important. But let me, because things get complicated when we start talking about Marvel and DC, because most people only know Marvel and DC. I was hoping I had them all someplace in one place, but it doesn't look like I do. Let me look one other place, Karen, while we're talking, and see if I have them stacked here. Oh yeah, here we go. There we go. So when they rebooted Black Panther, and here are just a few of them, because the other thing about it is, people, when y'all think about buying comic books, I go to comic book store every Wednesday, except during the plague. When they reopen, we all back in there like the dope fiends we are. Comic book collectors, fiends. They be around here, you know. And so it's very interesting. So I'm in there, and you get your comic books single issue, little thin issues like this, right? And I'm gonna talk about this one in a minute, because this is DC. I'm buying a couple of DC now, and I'll tell y'all why. But then what the comic book industry figured out is, and there's a whole backstory. The Marvel went to bankruptcy, and then the Marvel DC wars, and then the Black characters were not valuable, so they sell off some licensing ability. Remember, DC had the first big superhero movie with Superman, Christopher Reeves, 1978. So DC gets out in front of it in the movies. Marvel don't think the movies got any potential, so they selling off licensing. Who buys Blade? Snipes. Snipes wanted to make Black Panther too, but the tech wasn't right. It was Wesley Snipes' Blade that brought the Marvel Cinematic Universe into being, really, if you go back. Because remember, when Blade drops, that's because they had a corny Captain America on TV, and they had the Spider-Man cartoons. But Blade is the live-action hero that shows the Marvel characters the way. And it's a damn shame now, because Wesley Snipes, in many people's imagination, is a punchline. Oh, no, you should go back and talk to Wesley Snipes about that. But anyway, Panther, they reboot. It's the Hudlins. Actually, it's Reginald Hudlin. Writes Black Panther, A Nation Under Our Feet. Now, when you buy your comic books every week, you get them one at a time. You wait. Once a month, they publish your titles you're looking for. Then they figure out they can clump together whole runs, 6-issue runs, 12-issue runs, 20-issue runs after they've been published. That's what they call the TPB, the trade paperback. These are trade paperbacks. This is what they look like. They're thin. So, this is Black Panther. Ta-Nehisi Coates is the latest writer to reboot Panther, right? Ta-Nehisi Coates, there he is, Storm. Now let me see if I have the one in here where they know. Oh, and for a time, he got together with Roxanne Gay, and they did World of Wakanda. Very important, because then they started getting Black women to write the Black women characters. In fact, they had a Black superhero team, the Ultimates. Very important. So see, Captain Marvel in the comics, if you saw the Captain Marvel movie, there was a little Black girl because her mother was best friends with Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. When the comic book fans saw that, they said, okay, y'all about to get this right. Because Monica Rambeau is from New Orleans, and she becomes Captain Marvel. or Quasar, or Pulse, Quasar. She's like bigger than Captain Marvel. That's a whole nother story. But now, when, let me finish the truth thing. So when Black Panther marries Storm, this is when Reginald Hudlin is writing the book. Black Panther marries Storm because they both from Africa. Remember, Storm is really Kenyan. And so she grew up, around her. Storm's parents were activists. They knew Malcolm X. They were murdered. It's a whole backstory to that. They doing it. And then by then they do a mini series actually on the backstory of Storm's parents. Who writes that is what's my man's name? Eric Jerome Dickey. Oh, it's crazy. They got it's comic books now. These cats writing comic books, right? So Storm and T'Challa, Ororo and T'Challa fall in love. They get married. They have the wedding in Wakanda in the middle of the civil war between the superheroes. So if you've seen Captain America Civil War, what you don't see is in the comics, they was fighting each other about whether they should register as superheroes or not with the American government. But they all paused because T'Challa said, I ain't in it. I'm an African. I'm over here. Y'all ain't pulling me in the middle of that bullshit here. I'm getting married. Who's coming? Y'all coming? Cool. But here's the thing. No beef in Wakanda. So all the superheroes show up, put their arms down, and they're going to come to the wedding. There's a scene in the comics. You reading the comics. Here come the black superheroes. Here come Luke Cage, Falcon, Blade, the Brit. He's in town. They all in Wakanda. The Falcon is pushing a wheelchair. Luke Cage looks over at another black superhero and says, is that who I think it is? The brother says, yeah. Page gives the other brother a pound as the Falcon rolls by, and in the wheelchair is the original black Captain America. He never leaves his apartment in New York. You know what I'm saying? But they get married. I'll come to the wedding. And I said, how did he get, man? That's the original Captain America. Yes, sir. Because these two get married. It was the event of it. Now, again, people watch the movies and think, oh, this is great. No, go get the comic books. You'll be very happy. In fact, I'll end with this for now. These are just some of the Falcons. I know Disney is doing Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but the Falcon, because Falcon was coming to new Captain America, there he is with the wings. I didn't pull 175, the original, where you see him first get his wings from. But now they got black women are writing a lot of the chapter. This is Shuri. Remember, she's probably going to be the Panther coming up. Who's writing Shuri? Nanette Okafo, the science fiction writer. She's writing Shuri now. So when you go to the comic stores, get that. My friend Eve Ewing, who's professor, the poet, professor in Chicago, very brilliant sister. She's writing Riri Williams. Riri Williams is the Iron Man now, Iron Heart. You know what I'm saying? So, you can get these comics, right? And so here's another Shuri. I love the artwork, right? Because they're getting to stretch out and they still doing their fiction. They still doing their writing. And it's all kind of variations. Look, this is, Lord have mercy. I even hesitate to show this, right? Because they try to make money from everything, right? This is a novelty. Barack Panther versus the tremendous Trump, right? So you got Barack Obama as T'Challa fighting Trump. It's crazy, all kind of stuff. But I want to show a couple of others. Of course, we know there's a black Spider-Man, of course, because everybody saw the cartoon Into the Spider-Verse. Here's the comic, one of the comics, Miles Morales. He's Afro-Latino. He's Spider-Man now. Right? So, it's just amazing. Here's here's a couple of other variations. Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Many of you all know this. And if you got young people watching right now, they looking like, yeah, they're my comic books. And that's the other thing. I'll tell you about that in a second. I'm just going to show you a couple more of these. So, Coates says, Marvel approaches him. They start talking. And Ta-Nehisi, they ask him, you interested in some other stuff? And according to Kerry James Marshall, who, by the way, was playing around with comic strips, I got all the Kerry James Marshall catalogs. This is one that's kind of harder to find. It's called, this is actually one of the catalogs, Along the Way. I went to New York to see the Kerry James Marshall exhibit because Kerry James Marshall was playing around with sequential art in something he called Rhythm Master back in the 80s. He's playing with Rhythm Master. He's got a whole series of comics based in Chicago, but you can't really see them because it wasn't a comic book. It was just panel art that kind of had stories in it. And so I went to New York because they had some of them on display and picked up a couple of the catalogs that are almost impossible to find. But you know, because the art catalogs, the thing about them is they produce them for a very kind of targeted audience, and they hella expensive. So if you can't just scrub through all the used places and go to all the little backwater places and the remainder stores in New York, you won't get them. And then sometimes you just got to take the plunge and spend the money to get it, because once you get it, you got it. But you know, that's how it works. But at any rate, so wait a minute, hold on, because I put that down to get that. Oh yeah. They asked Ta-Nehisi. K. James Marshall said, when approached about writing for Marvel, he wanted, I think it was Spider-Man, not Daredevil. Somebody else wanted Daredevil. But they gave him Captain America. I'm sorry, they gave him Black Panther. Eventually, Ta-Nehisi gets this. He's still writing it. Captain America. Wow. Now Coates is writing Captain America. Now that's cool. I ain't mad. But my thing is, I think you started at the top of the food chain as far as a kid who was collecting comic book starts. F Captain America, you had Black Panther, brother. I mean, I know you want to write about America and the complicated relation, and it's actually brilliant in terms of what does it mean to wear the flag when you're in a country that has never really embraced patriotism, and really that's a contradiction, and Black people looking at you like you crazy, and a lot of white people too, like America, the symbol of America. But that's a storyline that was explored back in the 70s when I was a kid. At one point, Captain America took off the uniform and he became Nomad, the man without a country. He was so disillusioned with America, he took off Captain America and put on Nomad, the man without a country. I mean, so even though Ta-Nehisi is much more nuanced and brilliant in terms of thinking through these things, it ain't the first time Captain America said, nah, I'm going to turn from the thing. But you've got all these other people. I'll show you. Now, this is the DC title that I buy now. This sister right here, we all know N.K. Jemisin, the great science fiction writer, who's won the multiple Hugo Awards, right? The highest award you can get in science fiction writing. This Black woman who is in the tradition of Stephen Barnes and Tamara Dew and a lot of these Black fiction, of course, Octavia Butler. This is Far Sector. Now, there's been Black Green Lanterns before, but they were men. She's writing Far Sector, the Black female Green Lantern. So, I mean, I'm like, okay, I see you, sis. There's some people saying, you still reading these funny books? Look, N.K. Jemisin writing the story, Jamal Campbell doing the inks. And so this is DC, Direct Comics as it was known. And so these are some of the books, and I should just mention a couple of, because I'm always looking for Black content produced by Black people. These are some books that some of the African Center community have done. Protectors of the Native Order, they're writing. Wanzo, these are African superheroes. At one point, Joe Quesada, Natives Protect Order, Joe Quesada at Marvel was going to launch a comic that never got launched, but you see these characters in Daredevil. He had an idea for something called the Santerians. He was going to put Santeria superheroes together and name them for the Orisha of the Yoruba. Still looking for that at one point. Let me see if I can just do a couple more that I wanted to show you just in terms of, oh, yes. No, that's not the one. Because I had some that I sent away to England for, because this brother is doing a whole thing. Oh, yes, here we go. I even keep them in the same thing. The brother got them for me. Made in America. There's Malcolm, the FBI files of Malcolm X, right? Here's Malcolm when he went to Cairo, looking at the Sphinx. You see the resemblance. There's Alex Haley. He's doing a whole series on how they chased Malcolm X and the Marcus Garvey factor, Made in America, and then Hoover. I mean, but I love it. And then he's got these like Malcolm X busts, $6 or 50 pounds, free shipping, Black Belt comics. I'm saying, so comic books have their own world. And for me, the value in comics is it's reading that allows us. I wanted to see if there was something. Oh yeah, I should probably show some more of these African comic books as well. Kwesi. Here's a collector's edition of Kwesi. So you got continental Africans are doing stuff, right? Collector's edition, Southern Africa coming out. Black superheroes, Kwesi. Dwayne McDuffie, as I mentioned before, they're the ones who had Image Comics. Icon was very important. Also got, of course, Steel. Remember Shaquille O'Neal played Steel in the movie? Yes. That was a Black comic artist. Dwayne McDuffie and them did Steel. Steel came before, the book came before the movie. Static, which is very important. This is
Michael Davis.
Yes, exactly right. Jules Smith. Casey Lehman, the writer, did a foreword to this. It's called Afrocentric. This is an interesting comment. Here go all of them right here. You can read for yourself, right? But comics for me are, I keep looking at these. Oh yeah, I should show you. I'm gonna show you. Let me show you these couple right here. Victor Laval is an interesting brother, science fiction writer. He's actually married to one of my sister's classmates from high school. Actually, we were all in school together. Carla Hall, myself, my brother Jeff, my sister Gussie, James Bernard, who's one of the founding editors of the Source magazine, his younger sister, Emily Bernard, who's a top-rate scholar. She's at Yale. We all came out of Hillsborough High School in Nashville. And no, it wasn't no elite school, just the K-12 public school in Nashville that Nick Rose was going to too. But her husband, Victor, has done a remix of the Frankenstein story, except just like Truth, they experimented on Black people. So the Restorer is in, but here's one I think everybody should. Did you see that movie, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Slayer?
I read the book first.
Oh, did you?
The book was way better than the movie.
Karen.
Yes.
Everybody, this is one book I do not have, and I must now get it because I love the movie. Why did you love the book? Tell me about the book.
I grew up on Stephen King, so I didn't do comic books, but I was doing all that horror. And shout out to Knarrative Do, and she introduced me to Octavia Butler, which I went down that whole couple years ago.
Great sister, I love her.
Yes. Oh my God, the Living Blood, My Soul to Keep, The Good House. I read every single one of her books. Amazing. And so I read all of Harry Potter, all of Twilight, all of that. I have the Harry Potter gifts box set right behind me. I'm into all of that, not comic books, but that's my jam.
So we right there together. You know, you sell all those books at the same place, comic books. So we would have seen you in the store.
You would have seen me nudging kids out. Harry Potter, first night, midnight, get my book, tripping the 5-year-olds. But that vampires and all of that otherworldly stuff, and I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, that's weird or what have you. But we're living in a supernatural space. And we have to be able to see, all of the machinations, through this living blood, through this everlasting life that we are, this journey that we're on. So to see history, Abraham Lincoln through a vampire's eyes, it was an amazing book. And there was, we're in it, we're in it in spaces, of course, because of slavery. The backdrop is that. It was amazing. The movie sucked to me.
Well, I didn't know the book.
If you like the movie, you're gonna love the book.
But I'm looking. But you know why I liked the movie wasn't Abraham Lincoln. It's Harriet Tubman.
Yes.
So how is she in the book? You telling me I'm gonna love it?
Read the book.
Okay, that's all I need to hear.
People in here wondering about book clubs. There've been people contacting me wanting to start book clubs around the books that we drop. Do it. I mean, this is the collective that I imagine that everybody picks up the baton, finds your passion. We're doing this because this is your passion. And I want people to see what that looks like when you have a burning desire to do things. And it's not just myopic. We're not just looking at history, but it makes us complete people to have these things that we love to do. So if you want to do a book club around comic books, part of the in classic, run, do it every month and have fun.
Please, we want you. Please, absolutely. In fact, we just scratched the surface. I wish we had. I thought about Brother Voodoo. Brother Voodoo was Dr. Strange's friend. That's a whole nother thing. In fact, they've rebooted that now. He had a brother. It's a whole nother conversation. But I'm glad you mentioned it. Now I'm going to get the book because, when they made the Lincoln biopic on how they passed the 13th Amendment, I'm like, look, I know the history too well. I don't need to see Daniel Day-Lewis, who's an incredible actor. I don't need to see Lincoln reanimated. But Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer, like you said, it isn't historical, but the metaphors are there. It's white supremacy, right? This is a white supremacist. These vampires, which is what y'all are, white nationalists, are trying to suck the blood of, And so when Harriet Tubman comes in, rolling deep with the solution, I'm like, yo, I love the metaphor. And so I can't wait to read the book. And the reason I mentioned it came to mind, and I'm so glad it did, because now, again, y'all watching, y'all see, this is what literacy looks like. And that's I meant to mention that. Before he made transition, my friend Kane Hope Felder, the great scholar of Black religion, asked me to come over to Howard Divinity School one afternoon to talk about comic books. And so I put together this presentation on comic books. And I'm talking, me and Dr. Felder, and I'm showing images. And, you know, the School of Divinity at Howard, just like the International Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Payne out there in Ohio, near Wilberforce, you know, when they do things, it's Black seminary, which means when people come to talks in the evenings, they often bring their children as family. So there were a lot of children there. And I remember as I was showing the images and we're talking, the adults are interested in looking, but the children are fired up. And it was fascinating to me because, and I'm talking about now, I'm talking about maybe as young as 8 or 9, maybe as old as 14 or 15. It fascinated us to see how many of these parents didn't know this whole universe that was right under their nose because the children knew the books. And so as I'm saying, and of course this happens, and somebody said, oh, that's it, tell them. Yeah, see, because in this one right here, and the adults, what? You know that? Yeah. That's what those books are in your room. I'm saying comic books come into households and people, and sometimes parents think, oh, so-and-so. No, these are adult stories. Do you understand? All the relationships you might think that you should know, they coming in the comic books. But the reason I thought about Harriet Tubman, this is,
I love him.
You know the cat?
Yeah, David. Yes.
Oh, tell us about him. I don't know him. I just love his work.
He's first of all, he's an amazing human being.
I love it.
He was supposed to be working with who's the young lady that does The Chi? And I can't remember her name. Golly.
Oh yeah, I know you're talking about.
You know her.
Yes,
okay,
of course.
So she has a developmental deal, and he crowdfunded that.
They're gonna make this?
I don't know if it's gonna actually happen, but it should. And then I reached out to him, but I didn't have the resources to, to green light anything. But I recognize that is a powerful story. He's an amazing human being. He's got a beautiful smile, and that part here is everything.
Yes, that's probably a good way for us to close it then, because that shows you. I'm so first of all, the world is small. The Black world is small, and to hear that from you. And to hear that about him and her, that's the encouragement. And again, to bring it all the way back to where we started, we paused today in part because we're in the middle of a real fight. But when you pause, it always reminds you of why we're fighting, what we're fighting for. We're fighting for a world where the young people like that can create something like this and then put it on the screen so that your children can watch. That's why you go pull the ballot, not because you treating politicians like superheroes. No, you're their tools. I want my child to be able to walk in and get the same loan from her bank that you get at the same rate you get. And I don't want to have to come in here and tell a whole damn life story. I want my child to come in the same your child does, and somebody see her last name and don't start asking a whole bunch of questions. No, that's what you use politics as a means to an end, and the end is creativity. So yeah, oh man, I'm so happy to hear that, Karen. See, that gives me hope.
Harriet Tubman, Demon Slayer. We're gonna have to make that into
that's what she was.
Saturday morning cartoon. I'm just putting it out. I'm speaking it so that
come on, y'all.
See, with
versus everybody, and she's gonna win. So you already
come on. All right. So let me ask some questions. Can I ask you some questions, people? And let me thank Donica and Ahmad and Kareem and Renee and all of the people that are Yara helping us out.
Are they crowdsourcing this? I'm telling you, Lance, Carter Woodson did that. If everybody, in fact, Lance said, we're going to everybody put 5 on Cash Out, and I believe we're going to have 50,000 people do this. And I'm looking at the number of people who watch us and multiple watch us, and I'm saying, this is how Carter Woodson built the Association of Negro Life and History, published the Journal of Negro History. School children in the segregated schools will put a nickel on it. And guess what that did? All them nickels came together and he published. Oh man, I just got another one. In fact, I can't resist. I was so happy to get my hands on this. This is the brother that wrote the history of Lincoln University. He is a professor of history, was a professor of history at Lincoln University, Jefferson City, Missouri, Sherman Savage. This is his book, The Controversy Over the Distribution of Abolition Literature, 1830 to 1960. See who published it. The Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. They published that. They published it in 1938. He dedicates it to his wife. This was his dissertation at Ohio State, the first Black person to get a PhD in history from the Ohio State University, W. Sherman Savage. Why am I showing it to you? Because, well, number one, I just finally tracked my copy down. This is another precious volume because I've been getting all my Sherman Savage stuff. I got his history of Lincoln University, and I wanted to get this too. Woodson would publish the dissertations from the handful of Black people who were getting PhDs in this country in the 1920s and 30s. And he was able to do it because, among other things, Black school children in the segregated schools put their nickels on it, and he had a publishing company that could publish. That's the importance of contributing. And as Woodson would always say, if we all do a little, nobody has to do a lot. And I'll end with this, just on that topic, because when you said it made me think about when you start thanking people who are pitching in. The bottom line is this: it gives you two things. Number one, it enables the institutions to do what we're doing, for all of us to do that, and it gives you literally buy-in. For Woodson, it wasn't just that these kids sent me $3 that they had collected school-wide, a nickel and a dime at a time. It meant then, and particularly in Washington, D.C., when the school children would come to the association or the neighborhood, guess what they are? They're investors. No question. It's mine. I got some money in here on this. Let me see the books, Dr. Woodson. Well, you know what? I'll do better than that. I'll give you a job packing books. Langston Hughes worked for Carr G. Woodson one summer. Packing books, working there. In other words, okay, this is what you do. And I'm paying you out of money that y'all gave me, which shows me, and then somebody come in, well, we're going to shut this down. You ain't shutting nothing down. You didn't give us no money, and we ain't come to you for no money. So in other words, we free. So anyway, I thought.
And on that note, let me thank everybody, the super stickers, the Cash App, and all of that. You
No
are
question.
literally funding Dr. Carter's, Dr. Carter.
Well, we talking about Carter G. Woodson. That's what.
Yeah, your book habit, your book addiction.
Oh, it's no question.
And it is my life's mission to make sure when this pandemic is over that we start the Dr. Greg Carr Library in Tennessee.
Oh my God! Whatever we do, it ain't gonna be named for me, Karen. We gotta come up with a better name than that.
Oh, there's no better name than Dr. Greg Carr. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All right. Jason Grady wants to know what comic story has touched or informed your thinking about reality.
Oh, all right. Let me think quickly about that. Actually, let me just say a couple of very quickly, and I'm gonna try to answer these quickly. We can get as many as possible. We can take some time. Ta-Nehisi Coates. When Ta-Nehisi did his intergalactic empire of Wakanda kind of run, Ta-Nehisi explores this notion of what happens in Wakanda when people start being critical of the Wakandan government. And I thought it was good because he introduced, this was a couple of years. So if you go into look at the trade paperbacks about 2 years back, I'd get up and go over here. I actually have one. Well, anyway, I'm not going to.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I won't. Yeah. Because I'm not big on, a lot of times if I see particularly elders, I'll ask them to sign my books because people, so I got one that Ta-Nehisi signed last time I saw him with Paul, but I think it's over there on the shelf, but I don't know, I put those somewhere else. But the thesis in short is, we don't have perfect societies, and Black people are no exception. So Wakanda, we think of, I heard here T.I. say, Atlanta is our Wakanda. It sure is, metaphorically. Why? Because all the class divisions, all the poverty, all the Black people in charge of the politics and haven't done enough yet, it's all there. What Ta-Nehisi does in that series that he's done in Panther is reveal what happens when we talk about those tensions. And he has the characters in conflict. T'Challa is gone from Wakanda too much. He's a little imperial about this stuff. What about the traditions? I mean, there are some things I would have disagreement with, and I'm sure he would say, good, that's what you're supposed to do. So that helps inform my thinking about the possibilities of using creative tension and exploring things that can't be resolved. And the other thing I say quickly at the end, and just in terms of one more example, I get two examples. That was one, Panther. Reading comics from the time I was 9, 10 years old and looking at Black characters in the white stream comics like Marvel and DC, and then the independent Black comics, has helped me demystify the whiteness that we are all subject to. We're taught to worship whiteness in this society. But when you read the comic books, you see, comic book writers and artists are often people who are thinking about a different kind of world. So in the comic world, when T'Challa, Black Panther shows up, or Storm shows up, Thor ain't supreme. Steve Rogers ain't supreme. And so from childhood, you begin to explore the idea that these white heroes are not always heroic. And these black heroes are every bit and sometimes more heroic than anybody else. And so we look at ourselves and we look at the world like equality is not my goal. My goal is for all of us to be human in the world. Because as Elijah Muhammad said, who are they to be equal to? And you learn that in the comics. So that's one way.
I love it. I love it. This is not a question, but Holcomville with Dr. Angel, O.J. Holcomb, said, please tell Dr. Carr that my uncle is Christopher James Owsley Priest, the first Black comic book editor and writer.
Yes. Oh, you talking about Priest? Yes. Well, wait a minute. Is this the Christopher Priest who I wonder who was the first Black writer to take Black Panther? See, Black Panther has gone through stages. Black Panther did not have Black writers at the beginning. Remember, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee create Black Panther in 1966, and they get shook by the Black Panther Party for a minute. They switch his name to the Cold Tiger. Now, the irony is the Cold Tiger was the nickname of Patrice Lumumba. They switched back to Black Panther. Yeah, it's crazy. Don McGregor, in fact, Don McGregor was the white dude who did Black Panther, and he was the one who did Jungle Action, and he's the one who blacks up Black Panther. This is the trade paperback Black Panther, Panther's Quest. You see Don McGregor on the, actually, no. Don McGregor is very interesting. Don McGregor takes Black Panther and has Black Panther. He goes to South Africa to rescue his stepmother Ramonda, who T'Chaka, his father, marries after his mother dies, birth mother dies. That's who the stepmother, that's who Angela Bassett is playing in the movie. That backstory ain't been revealed yet. Again, I said it's a whole other, and maybe they won't reveal it because, you know, the movie's really not based on the comics except loosely. But Christopher Priest is the one who revives Black Panther in the 1990s. He turns Black Panther into, that's as close as T'Challa has gotten to like Batman. In other words, he's very urban. And McGregor's Panther was a school teacher in Harlem. Priest's Panther is lightweight. He's royalty, but he's also kind of thuggish. So he's liable to beat the snot out of some. I mean, Priest has this very, really gritty, realist kind of Black Panther imagining. And Christopher Priest, in many ways, really reboots Black Panther. And I love Priest for that reason. And then, of course, Priest leaves. And that's when you see Hudlin come in later. Hudlin's Panther is the heroic Panther. Hudlin's Panther is the quote-unquote Afrocentric Panther. Hudlin's Panther is the one where the opening scene of the first issue of Hudlin's Black Panther, you see the white colonialists, like they came in South Africa and West Africa, they fighting the Zulu, they fighting the Ashanti in West Africa. They come into Wakanda, they're gonna invade, and you see all these spears come up out of the sky, out of the ground, and then come down and kill a bunch of them. And the Wakandans is like, yeah, we know what you're doing around here, but white boys, don't y'all come up in here. We will kill every last one of y'all. In other words, so it's like, it's just right there in your face. It's really black and white. In fact, that's when Storm and T'Challa get married. And then Ta-Nehisi takes it over in the reboot. And his is more of an introspective, complicated, nuanced, human, I won't say human, Black Panther. See, a lot of times we read comic books, and I said this in the afterwards to Todd's book. We read comic books for Black people to kick everybody ass and go home. We didn't want to see Luke Cage wondering about his mortality. No, beat that white man. No, the comic books of the 1970s were like the movies of the 1970s.
Yes.
Come at our afro with a gun, blast the white cop, and go home. Cross 110th Street, Yaphet Kotto. This ain't Mr. Big and James Bond, Live or Let Die. Hell no. This is Across 110th Street. This is Willie Hutch. You know, this in the comic book, same thing. Luke Cage. In fact, I hate that is it Hodari that did the Netflix piece with Mike Coulter. I hate that is off the air. Because when I saw that Luke Cage, I said, this is the Luke Cage we grew up with. But if that's the same Christopher Priest is a watershed Black figure in the history of comic books. Very important. Now, wow, okay, that's good to know.
Our nephew is right in here watching you. And somebody had a question about who profits, right? So, you talking about Marvel and DC. Are we funding white legacies and things like that? And I talked about Harry Potter and the Twilight series.
Yes.
I mean, we both, put money in pockets, but there's an exchange, and for me, the hope is that I get sparked to do my own thing when I read something that somebody else has done. It's inspiration. It's also, let me correct this. I don't know if we can only put our dollars here. I think we should have a mind to definitely fund Black bookstores and Black authors and support. But I don't think we should eliminate all white facing literature and commentary.
We can't. Even if we wanted to, we can't. But what has been raised is extremely important. Let me say it like this. During the time of direct American apartheid, de jure and de facto, by law and by fact, we had no choice. That's why Woodson is publishing the Black Publisher, Associated Publishers. The first histories of the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, were published by Black concerns. This is the new one, as I showed y'all last week, the history of the AME Church. The publisher is Cambridge University Press. I'm not happy about that. I'm going to tell you why, but I can't stop it and wouldn't stop it at this point. See, the reason I'm why is because when scholars, academics, because people write, they talk about publish or perish. Everybody's heard that, right? When you publish with a Cambridge University Press or University Press, the people at the university, including the Negro colleges, sadly, will give that more credit than a Black publisher. Now, I have, I've anchored my intellectual work primarily in teaching. I've written not nearly as much if I had anchored my intellectual work in writing. And at this stage in my life now, I'm transitioning from that. In fact, thanks to you, and this is part of the classroom that we're developing this now. I can do it, and I'm gonna do more writing. But when I do write, I have prioritized Black presses. This is the first book written by Black people on the Trump presidency. It's called Not Our President, New Directions from the Pushed Out and Others in the Clear Majority in Trump Stolen America. Haki Maabuti and Lazana Kazembe edited this book, and it was published Third World Press. That is, of course, Chicago. When you look at who's in this book, you see a lot of people. It's not just white people. Bill Ayers is in the book. Jerry Ball, of course, is in the book. But you also see Elizabeth Warren is in the book. I'm in the book. A lot of different people are in the book. My point is this. And by the way, if y'all want to read about what's going to happen after next Tuesday, you should read this book, because this book isn't anchored in just a criticism of Trump and Trumpism and white nationalism. What this book is about, what the United States will look like after this thing goes away. Gerald Horne is in this book. In fact, but I said to say this. When I had to put together portfolios or whatever, university asked me for something, resume or whatever, I put this on here. They may look at this and say, "Oh, it's Third World Press. It's not academic press." Do you really think there's anyone drawing breath, past, present, or ever alive, don't think that I couldn't get something published with Cambridge University Press? When those of us who publish with Black presses, we make a choice. The pathological mind thinks somehow, oh, this must not be as prestigious. No, what you've done is reinforce white supremacy. So finally, are we supporting Disney? Yes, which is why when Black Panther came out, one of the things I said was, of course I'm going to see it. I've been watching Black Panther for years, and I'm going to see it in the theaters one time. And then I'm going to figure out who's selling it on the street. My man Steve on 125th Street in Harlem. Usually the week something come out, he got the crystal clear joint. I'm going to support Black businesses and leave it at that. But Disney understands that the ticket buying audience in the world is majority overwhelmingly non-white. So don't think that T'Challa shows up in Captain American Civil War because Disney all of a sudden got religion. They know how to count. So as my man Ishmael Reed, who just did this, The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda, says about Hamilton, and this is the play that he wrote. He says, y'all looking at Hamilton. Ishmael Reed said, my wife thinks that Lin-Manuel Miranda was probably more interested in show tunes. Now, if you want to see his stuff, go see In the Heights, because he's grounded that in the Afro-Latino experience, right? I mean, you see that In the Heights, right? You see really what he's talking about. Hamilton, brilliant choreography. I mean, brilliant book, you know, the songs, everything is incredible, right? You know, in fact, get the Hamilton mixtape, which is where you really see the vision that transcends these white slave masters that he's, but this is what Reed says. Reed says, you know what? I think maybe my wife thinks, you know, Hamilton was probably, Manuel Miranda was probably more interested in the show tunes and the intellectual challenge. Disney, interested in the money. So however much money Lin-Manuel made, guess what? And as we talked about before, you know, the actors saying, pay me to scale, Disney made all the money. They made billions. And so therefore, when we support that enterprise, we should always be thinking about how do we begin to control our intellectual product, our intellectual capital, and how do we then begin and continuously begin to support Black institutions so that these places are not the primary places, because they're going to make profit off what sells, and they'll get Black as hell. HBO did not do Lovecraft as an act of charity. It did it because we're going to subscribe. And I should say one other thing. Haile Gerima, the Ethiopian filmmaker who I love, he and his wife, Shrikiana, those are my people who own Sankofa Bookstore. When I go see Haile always says this. Haile and Shrikiana Gerima are two of the most important filmmakers alive. The Gerimas, Haile Gerima's films and Shrik's films, their films, Sankofa, Bush Mama, Harvest 3000, Adwa, their films, some of the most important films of the 20th and 21st centuries. Haile has been invited for years to be closer to Hollywood. Would you do stuff with us? Would you advise us? Perhaps even work on film? Haile won't do it, because Haile's question is this. He said, I'll raise my money for my films. He says, but his question is the question that was asked. Who controls it? He said, what happens when a structure is built to continue to profit off of your creativity, except it's no longer cotton? Well, it still is cotton and indigo and sugar and corn. Now it's your ideas. So when we're cheering, watching Lovecraft, remember that harvest is going into the pockets of a multi-billion-dollar transnational corporation. And the dream we should get being inspired from that is how to figure out how to jailbreak that and be the primary beneficiaries of our own harvest. So no, I don't have any disagreement with that. I'm with you. That's why I publish in Black publishers.
Am I stuck?
No. Oh, you were for a minute. She's coming back. There she is.
All right. And on that note, yep, let's end it with Paul Coates, who's in the comments.
Paul!
Paul Coates is in the comments.
Who printed this, wait, right? When you're on your own printing press, you print the book. The book says Third World Press, but it was printed up the street in Baltimore. The legendary William Paul Coates represent. Yes. He
just wanted to co-sign. He said, Greg is so right on this. Ta-Nehisi's first book loves were comic books, as was his dad's. So
hey, listen, I ain't giving nothing away. You had to talk to Paul one day, Karen, because listening to Paul talk, put it this way, I won't even say no more. Paul, no, get Paul, Ta-Nehisi, and Walter Mosley in the same room, mention comic books, and get out of the way. Because see, I'm a baby, and get Paul in, because apparently Mosley has an extensive comic book collection. So see, if Coates and Mosley on comic books, and we would both be sitting there like, yeah, I gotta take some more notes on that.
I love it.
Yes.
Let me just say, I love you. No matter what happens on Tuesday, we're gonna be all right.
Oh, the sun coming up tomorrow. We came through enslavement. This is what's next?
What is next?
What's next?
Next Saturday, I'll see you. It'll be probably a new president, and we're gonna have to get busy doing work. That's when the real work starts. So
the real work.
I want to thank you for this respite. Thank you for this pause. Thank you for sharing your love. And I want to thank everybody who was with us today. This is a labor of love. It is our pleasure, all of you thanking us. I don't know what I would do without you on Saturday. So let me thank you again, Dr. Carr.
Thank you, Professor Hunter, and be safe. Everybody, you be safe, because listen, when these fools start storming out in the streets on Tuesday, just back up off it, because they feel like their world is ending. And if we're talking about white nationalism, it is ending, because we're going to break its back. But don't be in the streets trying to throw hands, because you don't know who's going to come out on their side. A lot of them going to have badges on. So don't jump out in the middle of this. We're not going back to the 19th century. We're not going back to no bloodshed. Let's get through this safe and protect those young people and protect those elders.
Mm-hmm.
And If you can't avoid it, win. Anyway, we're gonna stop.